Lucifer means Lightbringer presents the mythical astronomy of ice and fire.
Fire and Blood, live show. Who killed Septon Moon? Hello, everyone. Hello, myth heads, friends, mythical astronomers, even meth heads. If you're watching, welcome. Maybe this is the beginning of a new day for you. You're straightening out your life. You're watching mythical astronomy live panels. Not going to do meth anymore. Thanks for
swapping myth
us.
for meth or meth for myth.
Absolutely, yes, it's much safer. And joining me today are all sorts of friends and partners and content creators and folks that we know and love. And since he's already spoken up, I will start with Aziz. History of Westeros. Say hello.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, it's me again. I'm back and happy to be here. It's really fun to discuss new material. That's one of the best parts of being in this fandom. You know, we get a bit of that with the TV show week to week, but this is a higher quality than the TV show. I think most of us would agree. And even if you don't, well, there's just way more of it. So at least we have quantity. I'd say we have quality and quantity. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to tearing into this. This is my first time getting to discuss it with anybody outside of my own social circle. So yeah, thanks again. Let's do this.
Not only are we getting the virgin Aziz take, it's also Aziz's birthday. So let's all say happy birthday.
Thanks.
Happy
Thanks, everybody.
birthday.
Happy birthday.
We do thank you for joining us on your birthday. That is very flattering. Happy to have you here with your first Fire and Blood take. And joining me as well, I've got Storm Emma, Archmaester Emma of the Red Mice at Play blog. Say hello.
Hello, Archmaester Emma here. I have left my camera off to hopefully stave off the underwater robot voice this week. Hello.
Yes, under the sea is fun as a symbolic metaphor, but not so much as an internet connection. But yeah, hopefully it sounds good so far. So we'll keep our starry fingers crossed for you. And next up, I have Melanie Lot 7. Say hello, Melanie.
Hey, everybody. It's Melanie Lot 7. How's everybody doing? Are we ready to talk Fire and Blood? Because I really am excited about this.
Yeah. Melanie, I really appreciate you wearing your Valerian wig because
going Targaryen today.
Yeah, I had mine on and it was already itching out of me, and I just was like, no, just got a haircut.
Hey, I came prepared. I came with Fire and Blood. Mm-hmm.
You have a good, like, sort of, I don't know, maybe like a Visenya kind of a look right now. It's really nice.
Thanks.
Yeah, and by the way, Visenya quickly vaulting up the ranks of like favorite Targaryens as becomes one of the most three-dimensional characters from history. We'll talk about that as we go, but say hello. Last and certainly not least, perhaps greatest, bringing the visual element.
Greatest.
Yes, well, all of us talk. You actually bring beautiful pictures to us. So say hello, Sanrixian, Hand of the Dragon.
And Mallory Starshine.
Mallory Starshine.
Thank you.
Rider of Zulfric the Black Beast.
Titles. Hello, I am Sanrixian. I am super hyped because I got a bunch of dragon information, and I've already corrected LML once, annoyingly, about dragon genders. So I'm going to talk a lot, hopefully, on this panel. And for Aziz's birthday, I gave him the choice of which dragon he wanted to see, and we're going to get a Silverwing and a Vermithor with their riders.
Oh, yeah.
Woo!
How romantic. How romantic. So I thought it might be a fun way to go. There's so many ways to come at this. There's so much information. I thought it'd be fun to go do a little bit of a round robin thing and just take turns, having everyone put forward a topic to discuss. And then we'll all sort of kick it around a bit, and then we'll go on to the next one. And that way, everyone will get to bring up the things that they, stood out to them the most. And we'll obviously be looking in the chat as well, which I don't even have up. I guess I should pop that up. Hold on a second here. As I watch myself from 5 seconds ago talking. Hello, everyone. We've got over 100 people here already. We got a super chat from Mara Lee who says, happy birthday, Aziz. Love the costumes. Thank you.
Thanks, Mara.
Did I miss any super chats before I pulled this up? Guys, let me know in the chat if I did.
I did not see any from
Okay,
earlier.
I don't think so.
Very good, very good. The ritual 666 and 420 super chats will be along shortly, I am sure. So before we jump into that, I just wanted to real quickly say a word of thank you. It was Thanksgiving this past week, and I was reflecting on how thankful I am for our community in general, and of course my patrons as a whole. And I've seen a nice steady increase throughout the year in my patron support. In particular, earlier this year, there was a YouTube kerfluffle where I got demonetized for a couple months, and I had by far my biggest Patreon surge right after that. And I feel like everybody came out to support me, and that was really like, it was so much like the YouTube thing was a letdown, but the support that I got was 10 times more encouraging. And so I came out of that like actually more pumped and more encouraged. And that was essentially all thanks to you guys coming out to support. So I just want to take Thanksgiving to say thanks, everybody. And, you know, we say thanks a lot, but it really is true that this Starry Wisdom Sunday and my podcast and all the fun stuff that we do wouldn't be happening without the Patreons funding me to spend the time to do it, because it does take a lot of time, of course, to research and prepare and shop for banners on Etsy and buy wigs and things. I mean, it takes time and effort, and I'm a working man just like everybody else, and I wouldn't be able to dedicate this much time to it if it wasn't, helping to pay the bills and feed my family. So I just want to say thank you to everybody. I'm sure you guys have noticed there's been an increase in the amount of podcasts that have come out since about halfway through the year, since I got back from Con of Thrones. I've been doing more live streams and more scripted episodes and Between Two Weirwoods, and all of that is possible because of you guys. So just want to take this moment to say thank you, and you guys are awesome. And it's, sometimes I get discouraged for this or that reason, and I just think about you guys and it makes me feel good again. So give everybody else a chance to say something mushy real quick before we dive into Fire and Blood. Aziz, you've got probably a similar situation as me. You've got a lot of patrons. So why don't you go ahead and go next? And
Sure. Yeah, it's good to be thankful all year long, obviously, but this is the time where we, as a society, kind of make a point to do that out in the open. And Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday, and having my birthday always fall like right within a couple days of it. Every once in a while, it's on the same day as Thanksgiving. And so I just love this time of year. And yeah, it's wonderful to think back and how this all started, how it started for each and every one of us is a different road. We all got to this fandom through different ways, although there's probably a lot of similarities there. And it's just so much fun to think about and to remember all the fun people that we've met along the way. And absolutely, I definitely would not be able to do this without the support of the community. And I'm super thankful because it's just, like I said, I'm here on my birthday because I really enjoy doing this. And so being able to do what you like for a living is just indescribable. So I'm full of thanks, and will continue to be, I'm sure, because the community is going to continue to be the way it is, and it's continuously inspiring and fun and supportive, and couldn't ask for more.
Yeah, and I love the fact that we have like several patrons in common too. That's
that is really neat. Yeah. And speaking of, I've of course got my my ring rod and mask are made of. Actually, I'm gonna have to get the ring remade, because for my birthday I ground it up into a coffee line and just snorted it. So I'm gonna need a new one.
Aziz's Starry Wisdom title is the Black Maester, whose rod, ring, and mask smell of coffee. That is his title.
Yep. Well, so by the way, yeah, there's one of our kitties.
Yeah, we just had people asking for the cat, and there it is.
We also have if we should probably mention why Amanda's not here. I just realized.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, thanks for reminding me. So Amanda is under the weather. She had something come up. She is going to the doctor to get it taken care of. She's not dying, but please do extend her well wishes. I'm sure she'd appreciate that. She'll be on the mend soon, but she's not able to join us, unfortunately. But I will take a minute to say that she just did put out a new video. And of course, we're talking about Crowfood's daughter from the Disputed Lands YouTube channel. And her new video is about the Silver Sea. It's very short. And it's essentially, it's just taking the gathering up all the evidence, and here it is, approach to the Silver Sea theory. And the Silver Sea, of course, is a legendary inland sea that used to occupy some portion of the Dothraki Sea. And we don't know how big it is, but it's said that there was 3 lakes that are left over, and those 3 lakes might be the 2 in Sarnor and then the Womb of the World, which are really far apart. And if that's the case, it means the Silver Sea is huge, like covering like almost as big as the entire Dothraki Sea, or maybe as big as half of it or something like that. And she's basically just gathered the evidence and presented it, you know, and it's really awesome. I love this theory. It's one of the fun things that came out of the World of Ice and Fire. And what's also cool is that there's a lot of references to the Silver Sea and the Fisher Queens in Dany's Dothraki Sea chapters, which are written in the first book. So it shows you that Martin had a little bit of an idea about the Silver Sea and the Fisher Queens, even when he started off, as far as the background mythology, even though we didn't actually find out about them until, I think, the World of Ice and Fire. So that is, I see the link being dropped in the chat. Thank you, Melanie Lot 7. So just a quick shout out to Crowfood's daughter. We hope you feel better, Amanda. And everybody go check out the video because it is fun. And actually, my next Mythical Astronomy scripted episode will be more Dany stuff. And of course, my last one had a lot of the Dothraki Sea symbolism stuff. So good timing on Amanda's part. In any case, Melanie and Emma, I want to give you a chance to say thank you. And also go ahead and tell us what each of you are working on as well. And then I'll come back to Aziz for that question. So Emma, go ahead and go first. Tell us what you've been up to and say thank you to somebody.
I am still working on the Red Fire essay, mainly because it's ridiculously complicated in that I need to weave about 15 different threads together and make it somewhat comprehensible rather. So that's what I'm still currently working on. I want to say thank you for giving me the first opportunity to say thank you. It's my first Thanksgiving thanks because Britain doesn't do that. And also to the huge, like just amazing opportunity to participate in the sort of A Song of Ice and Fire community. Some of you may or may not know this, but I have depression, and so it is a joy to be able to interact with you guys on a day-to-day basis, and it's, you know, sometimes some of the very few bits of joy that I get in a day. So just wanted to say thank you to everyone for that.
Oh, that's very sweet, Emma. You know, I am coming at the thankfulness aspect of it from a pretty similar standpoint. For me, the thing that I'm most thankful for is the fandom itself, because I found some lifelong friends, and I just really could not have connected with these people without A Song of Ice and Fire and this fandom. And yeah, they bring me joy every single day. So that's definitely what I'm thankful for. And getting to interact with all of you is just a dream come true. I love sharing my passion for A Song of Ice and Fire with everybody, and the fandom makes it a reality. And by the way, I have a new essay out. The thing that I finally, I've been talking about it for a long time. I finally got it out. I have a King Under the Mountain essay that's available on my WordPress site. And hopefully I will be working on the YouTube version of it really soon. So be on the lookout for that. I'll drop some links in the chat.
Yeah, and the King Under the Mountain is one of those myth themes, as they like to say. It's a you know, like the World Tree or the Fire of the Gods. It's a well used trope, and it's
there's a lot.
Basically, the dragon locked in ice is one of the primary like symbolic incarnations of that idea. And I spent like almost 2 whole series talking about the Ice Moon and the dragon locked in ice symbolism that applies to Jon and the others and all that crap. So Melanie's, I've been talking to Melanie this morning, actually. I think we're going to actually do some sort of collaboratory roundtable thing where we get some of the myth heads together to actually discuss this topic. Because Melanie, I read your essay already, and you're just scratching the surface. I mean, it goes so far. So much.
Yeah. There's things in A Song of Ice and Fire that I didn't even touch on because I didn't want it to turn into this like enormous, like, you know, 10,000 word essay. So yeah, there'll be a lot.
And if I could probably speak up for everybody and just second what Emma and Melanie said, I think the fandom really does a lot for a lot of people. You know, whatever we're struggling with, or, you know, just the regular stress of life, man. It's so much fun to come together and with all of our friends, and, you know, even meet some of you guys at cons and become real life friends as well as just internet buddies. But these live streams are great. You know, we all hang out. We got our little community here and see each other in other people's live streams. And I think it definitely brings a ray of sunshine. So we don't need to go on and on about it, but big group hug, tons of fun. We all love it. So Sanrixian, give me, I know what you're working on. You're working on that calendar and a couple other things. But yeah, to give say a word of thanks and give us an update on what's happening.
Well, I mean, kind of same as Emma. I'm pretty open about my anxiety and my depression, and just lately, within these last couple months, I've been going through a lot of really rough personal stuff, and everyone in the community has just made me feel like a superstar and like I am so validated. So just thank you to every single person who comes to these YouTubes, who tweets at me, who retweets my art, who says, that's a nice picture you drew, because really, like, that just warms the depths of my soul. And thank you, Lucy, for giving me a platform to draw things on for people. And thank you, Aziz, because I wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for you. You retweeted one of my very first things that got me some notice. And Melanie, I love you. You know that. Emma, I love you. You know that. So I'm just thankful for everybody that this community has brought me. And yes, the calendar is in the works. I have filled all of the months. It's getting ready to be formatted and printed. There's a lot of formatting for calendars I did not foresee. But yes, that's what I'm working on. And there will be a bunch of prints available in my shop, new prints soon. So
nice. Well, the chat is alive with Sanri, you are a superstar comments, and indeed
Absolutely.
you are.
don't make
And
me
of course,
cry live.
Oh,
Well, we can't see you, so it's okay.
Yeah. We'll only hear the pitter patter of the raindrops falling.
As they drip onto my microphone.
All right. Well, before we gross everybody out with too much sappiness, let's gross everybody out and talk about worms.
Yes.
No, we're not going to get to the worms yet. No, can't. We got to save the worms, but we will talk about that.
Can I say one more sappy thing?
Absolutely.
Okay, so it was mentioned that many real friendships, a couple of y'all mentioned many real friendships and relationships come from this fandom. Well, I just want to say that Lady Gwen and Yolkboy got married yesterday. Speaking of people who came together because of they met on Westeros.org forums, and their podcast formed on those forums. And yeah, yesterday they tied the knot officially. So
I bet you half the chat is all like, I knew it, because they're not.
That makes me so happy.
I'm so happy.
They don't really.
They posted it
the
on.
fact.
They did. Yeah, they're private about it, but they did post it on social media, so I figured it's okay to say so.
Well, that is awesome. Congratulations to Yolkboy and Lady Gwen on behalf of all the myth heads in the chat. I see the chat going crazy. Yeah, a lot of people did not know they were a couple. I did know that, but they keep it on the DL. So yes, not only are they a couple, they're now married. It's the cutest thing ever. It's adorable. Put all the emojis in the chat. It's ridiculous. It's
also a bit of a triumph because it's really hard to. He's fully immigrated now. He got his green card and all that. So don't ever let someone tell you that immigrating is easy. It's so not. It took like 18 months for them with like huge amounts of money. They had to hire an immigration lawyer and all this stuff. Yeah, I don't need to give away all the details, but yeah, hearing about that process was like, wow.
I'm so happy.
That is really awesome. That's, what can we say? Nice job, guys. It is tough. When I met my wife, she was living in LA and I was living in San Francisco, which is about a 7-hour car ride apart. And we did long distance dating for about 7 or 8 months before, she moved up and we moved in together and stuff. So they were dating across the pond, which is even harder. So yeah. Got to tip the cap to that. That's true love right there. So, all right. Well,
so many onions today. Jeez.
Okay, parasitic worms. We're here to talk about parasites.
Dries those tears up quickly. Like, whoa.
Yeah. So actually, real quick, before we get into some of the heavy topics, I had some quick hitters that I wanted to toss out. Some real quick hitters. And in fact, let's see here. In particular, yeah. So here's a good one. So there's a potential Sandor parallel called Sandok the Shadow.
Yeah.
Now this is towards the end of the book, so I don't know if everyone got to this. We don't need to talk about it a whole lot, but Lyseni's swords guarded her day and night. And this is Lara Rogaire, under the command of her brother Moredo and a towering mute from the fighting pits of Marine called Sandok the Shadow. And he's a dark-skinned, it might be a Summer Islander, but he's got very dark skin. He's got no tongue and no lips. So he's like, you could see his teeth all the time, and he like bit somebody to death in the fighting pits. And he has this scene where he stands on the bridge and defends the Red Keep when some traitors are essentially trying to steal the throne, and he kills like 7 or 8 people by himself. And it's
so
like
badass.
Yeah, dude, it is. So I was just wondering about that. Is this like what's the potential Sandor parallel here?
I mean, if he's dark skinned, why doesn't he just burned?
He could be like Mokoro. Yeah, could be.
Yeah, since he's a mute, illiterate mute, it's probably his backstory couldn't have been explored too much, probably. But yeah, I mean, Sandor, it's literally 1 letter different. And George has done that kind of thing before with parallels like Sir Duck and Sir Dunk, who have a ton in common. And yeah, and this guy is about Sandor's size, maybe a little bit taller. And he's defending a person that's about Sansa's age. So, well, if you're talking about Viserys and Aegon, not Lara Rogaire, who was a little bit older. She was more like 19, but still a teenage woman.
He's defending like all 4 of them, really.
Yeah, you're right.
It came out that they were going to frame Aegon for the Rogaire's crimes, actually. So
look out for any scene with Sandor on a bridge or something like that, where he's defending a narrow path. Something like that could be,
Yeah, totally. And even the mute thing makes me wonder, because Sandor's on the Quiet Isle, like, will he take a vow of silence or something like that? That could make sense. Also, he's got a huge black sword, doesn't he?
Yeah,
which
I think cool. So. Yeah, it was like it reminded me kind of Kago Corpse Killer's Valyrian Steel Arak, sort of.
If Sandor got his hand on a Valyrian Steel sword.
Woo! Watch out.
All right.
I didn't make it that far. Sorry. So that's why I'm kind of like, ooh, my gears are turning, but
yeah. There's not a whole lot else to say about it other than, it's an interesting one. I guess we could maybe go back and study it a little closer, but essentially the Aegon III is in his regency at this point. He's not of age yet. And him and his brother and their 2 wives are in the Red Keep itself. And the people that are supposed to be the council, what do you call the council? The Regency Council. They're essentially making a power play to sort of swipe the throne. And so it's a little bit of like the king is under siege in his own Red Keep, and they don't have many people to protect them, but they have this guy Sandok the Shadow who just comes out and kills like 7 or 8 of soldiers that are trying to storm the bridge by himself. It's like
including knocking several of them off the bridge under the spikes below. So
in a very Mortal Kombat like
yeah, it's really something.
So yeah, which sword would it be if Sandor got a Valyrian Steel sword? So he's on the Quiet Isle. Think about it. What's floating around there? All kinds of things wash up on the Quiet Isle.
That's true. Yeah, there's I can't think of one that's super close by, but you never know if there's some of the ones that were mentioned in this book are not in A Song of Ice and Fire and are considered lost. You never know if he decides to bring 1 or 2 of those back. Could be rediscovered somehow, like the Royce one, Lamentation, and heck, the Lysene one, Truth. Like that one seems pretty unlikely, but you never know.
Well, that could be the whole point of creating a Sandor parallel to this guy who's a Lyseni floating around that sword. So. And they did mention Truth a couple of times. I don't know where it would be and how Sandor would get it, but just a loose thread to throw out there, I guess. And so here's another stupid one. This is even more stupid. So people worry about the others walking around the wall, right? Well, if they freeze the ocean, maybe they'll just walk around at Eastwatch, right? So check this out. Cold and hunger carried off 1/3 of the night's watch, and when thousands of wildlings walked across the frozen sea east of the wall, hundreds more of the Black Brothers perished in battle.
Remember that when there was that argument at the beginning of season 6 where people were like, no, it looks the sea is frozen at the intro, and people were like, nah, that wouldn't happen. Well, it wasn't, but apparently it could happen.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I'm referencing. Yeah.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
There's the foreshadowing, people. It's written in the stars.
That whole scene, that whole winter is very foreshadowy. Like, I think that was that's the winter of 130 to 135 or whatever, or 136. That's super nasty. That's the one you're talking about, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. It's sort of, and there's another one from 230 to 236. It's like the same, exactly 100 years later. But yeah, super foreshadowy. All the people starving, all the people turning to cannibalism, all the people sending all the Northern Warriors going south, all that stuff. We're going to probably see, maybe without the Northern Warriors going south part, because that's already happened. But all the other stuff.
So, okay, that actually reminds me of a serious topic. So let's talk about the winter fever. Emma, I saw you unmute yourself. You got something to say?
I was just about to say that the 2 hard winters that we see in the books are both accompanied by illnesses that are freakily cold, symbolizing goodness. So, yeah, that was very poor.
There was the winter fever, and then what was the other one? Oh,
the shivers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Daenerys, Jaehaerys' firstborn, Daenerys, dies of the shivers, which sounds like almost like too on the nose for Dany becoming like a Night Queen or something. Is that too obvious, or? It's
super obvious if you consider that the family tree was retconned to make Daenerys the firstborn. That was not the case in the World of Ice and Fire. It's a change. It was a different kid born first. So George specifically made it a Daenerys in retrospect. So it's so on the nose. We can't think otherwise, I think, because he specifically changed it to be a Daenerys, and then wrote this scene where she dies of the shivers. It's like, wow. Yeah. So I'm totally with you.
Hey, it just occurred to me that I missed a $24.99 super chat a few minutes ago. I filed it away when someone was talking. Forget to go back to it, and now I can't scroll back.
It was Mara Lee again, I think.
Yeah, it was Mara Lee.
Okay. Thank you. I was hoping somebody would know. Thank you, Mara, and also Sean E with the 420 ritual super chat. Thank you, Sean E. That was my thank you coming in like. Steven Stark did. He sent in the 666 super chat. And also Steven, just to let you know, he is on the mend. He says he's continuing to heal up.
Yay.
Excellent.
Little back issues and some illness earlier this month. Some of us pitched in to help him get through that, and he said thank you very much. So yeah, the shivers. That's it. Like you said, Emma, it's really weird. We get these magical illnesses. George really seems to like magical illnesses. We've all been wondering what the hell he's doing with Grayscale.
I think it's going to be something. I think it's going to be something really similar. I think I have thought for quite a while that Grayscale is doing something weird, symbolizing the others. Otherwise, why are the wildlings quite as terrified of it as they are? So I just think this lends credence to it. And then weirdly, it also becomes the 3rd major illness that we know about coming after a winter, if I remember correctly. Although maybe I'm not, because there's the sweating sickness. But is that after a winter? I'm not entirely sure. I'll defer to Aziz's superior knowledge there. Sorry to drop you in it.
I think that's correct. But yeah, having only read the book once, I definitely haven't locked all these details in yet.
So much.
You know, the line that popped into... Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sandra.
No, go on. I was just going to ramble a bit more, so feel free to talk to.
Okay. The line that immediately popped into my head when I read about the shivers was from the Ice Dragon. And it was about the cold was inside her. And I was just like, oh, no, the cold is inside all of them.
Yeah.
That's all.
No, the cold was inside her is I think, an important line. I think that's definitely some foreshadowing, like Aziz was getting at.
And this is it's important to note that this scene with the shivers comes right after the discussion of Targs and their immunity to diseases. So it's really quite striking that it's presented in a way like it's very informative. He tells you very specifically, yeah, we do have evidence. It's the first time it's really been laid out for us. Before it was like a suspicion because Dany did go right in the midst of the Pale Mare and never got sick before as well. So there was some evidence, but it wasn't strong evidence. It was just circumstantial. Now we have it just laid out like, yes, Targs do have immunity to disease. And as David said, the difference might be magical diseases are where they don't have the immunity. So if the shivers is magical or associated with the others or anything like that, that's huge. Same thing with grayscale. Grayscale is clearly magical. I mean, turning to stone and then stone, man, like that's a fantasy disease, right?
So check this out. Check this out. Ravenous Reader just found this crazy quote. Listen to this. The thought of drowned knights under the water gave Bran the shivers. He didn't object, though. He liked the shivers.
Oh
man.
my goodness. Good find. Wow.
That's so good.
Yikes. Which kind of makes sense if you think about the shivers as some sort of magical embrace of ice magic or the things of the north. Like Bran could definitely be headed for some sort of thing like that. Maybe not turning into an evil Night King, but we have seen like Cold Hands, who's animated by ice magic and yet plays on Team Life. And I've talked about John possibly being some sort of ice and fire, white. I've talked about the good other symbolism that we find. So yeah, maybe somebody will embrace the shivers.
Also, speaking of, go ahead, Aziz.
I was just one sentence. Just to say, this is that time where we have to look back over the whole series for references that George has expanded on here in Fire and Blood, and that just looking back to see references to shivers is a perfect way to do that.
To add on
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mel. You had something.
Just real quick, going back to the grayscale, I noticed that Septon Majel, who was the Targaryen, died of grayscale. She had grayscale in her arms and her legs, and that was her cause of death. So one more notch against Targaryen exceptionalism.
Well, and
Yeah.
grayscale was created as a curse against the Targaryens by Garen the Great, according to legend. So it's specifically tied to Targs, and I think that is where I came about to seeing that they are symbolizing others, because you have they were who the Lords of Fire basically get drowned and turn into cold stone men. So it's very much like that sort of fire to ice transformation symbolism, and they're doing it through the water, which sort of fits with the whole idea that the Weirwood net is this, medium where things can go in and become transformed and come out the other side a different way or something like that. So yeah, I'm on board with that. That's the best take I can have on the Stone Men, is that they symbolize others in some sense. But I just wish I knew what George is going to do, like literally with the plot. Like clearly Grayscale's coming to Westeros. Shireen might be carrying it, like what's going to happen with that? What roles are going to play? I don't know.
It's definitely one of the biggest mysteries. It's so clearly going to matter. We got a patient zero in the north and the south with Connington, and all this extra material in Fire and Blood. There's a lot of talk about diseases. There's a lot of it in the world of Ice and Fire as well. So yeah, and then there's the Pale Mare, and then all this other stuff kind of setting it up. So you wonder if the others have some sort of power over it. Like, could they have power over death? If you have a mortal disease, is that somehow like a connection? Or if you have grayscale in the brain, can they control? I don't know. Yeah, it's really hard to like figure out what's happening, and that's fun because we're pretty good at figuring out a lot of what is probably going to happen. But in the high point, this is such an obvious thing that's coming, but we have no idea how it's going to play out.
So Sanri, you had something you were going to say. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just going to add to what something that stood out to me. I have to read George's words, which is why it's taking me so long to go through this darn book, because I'm like, wait, and then you start doing all the connections, as you guys all know. But he I think it's on, let me look at my notes here. Page 193. He uses italics twice, and he says the Targaryens were different and they flew dragons, which just stood out to me because he, the whole quote is, all this the exceptionalist affirmed, but with this caveat, the Targaryens were different. Their roots were not in the Andalos, but in Valeria of old, where different laws and traditions held sway. A man had only look at them to know that they were not like other men. Their eyes, their hair, their very being all proclaimed their differences, and they flew dragons. So it's like something about that stood out to me, like in addition to them having apparently protection against these illnesses, where George is just straight up telling us they were different. Like sometimes, like I feel like it's as simple as taking those words in that context and being like, okay, what does this mean? Does that provoke thoughts? It provoked thoughts in me, definitely, about like where they are, what the exactly the nature of their relations to dragons were, what exactly it is about Targaryens that makes them different. And I mean, I think it's the dragon blood and the dragon bonds, obviously, which
Well,
Yeah.
we're totally throwing out my proposed format, but whatever. That's a good topic actually. So let's
okay, fine,
whatever.
sure.
No, I'm saying that's a good topic to raise up. So let's go with that. So there's a lot of information about the blood of the dragon. What does it mean? How did it get that way? We definitely get some clues about that in Fire and Blood. And I thought that was definitely a good discussion topic. The worms definitely give us a clue about that. But before we get into the worms, I thought it was interesting. So we've got the dragon babies, right? We already know that Rhaenyra has a dragon baby. Dany has a dragon baby. Maegor has a couple. Aziz, I was trying to remember. Is there another one?
Yeah, there's okay, so Maegor has a few. There's obviously Dany and Rhaenyra, and I believe there was at least one more new one in this story that I'm forgetting though. I forget whose it was, but I think I think we have at least 4 examples, counting Maegor as one, where really he's multiple.
Maegor has 3 malformed babies.
Whew.
And we got
And you can't blame that all on Tyanna of the Tower either. I don't buy that. Not when we have so many other lizard babies happening.
Yeah, poison wouldn't do that, would it? I mean, it's yeah.
So it could be that like stress or something, extra influences on a Targ pregnancy can lead it to go bad like that. Like Rhaenyra had her throne stolen from her while she was pregnant and was like raging about it. Dany obviously had, some trauma going on while she was pregnant with the whole tent of dancing shadows. So she was basically subjected her pregnancy to sorcery as well. So that it could be something like that could be induced. But clearly, at least the seeds or the potential for it is something that's inherently built into the Targaryen bloodline, which has always led us to believe that there's some actual like reptilian DNA. And then we get some new stories about Valyrian blood magic experiments in this book too, don't we? You're nodding your head, Melanie. Do you recall what that was?
Well, I was trying to think of the other malformed baby, and I don't think I got it. I thought it might have been Daella's, because she was under a lot of stress in the Vale.
She just lost her baby.
I think it was just a stillborn. And I just wanted to just really quickly mention that there's a lot of talk about how some of the babies are strong and hale and hardy, and some of the babies, in fact, kind of like the majority of the babies, are weak and tiny and frail. And there's a lot of discussion about that.
So this whole topic of blood magic and engineered species is right up my current alley, so to speak, because we just did 36 hours ago, we released Nymeria Part 2, which we talk about Gagasos and Sithorios. And one of the things about Gagasos is it was a city of blood magic. They did blood magic experiments. They did a created species. Septon Barth speculated that the Valyrians engineered dragons from worms and wyverns. They wouldn't have necessarily done this at Gagasos because Valyria was well established by the point Gagasos was founded. But we get expanded on that. And he uses the word chimera for some of the things that, like a generic word to describe the creations that they make. And an anecdote I love relating. There was enough on this topic, by the way, that I didn't put it all in Nymeria 2. I state during the episode that I'm going to do a bonus episode because there's just too much of it. And since Nymeria and the Rhinar don't directly interact with it, they just kind of set up shop near it, which was by itself a little strange. But that aside, it's too much of a topic and not quite related enough to what the Rhinar were doing. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun. And just lo and behold, right as I'm working on that topic, we get a lot of new stuff backing it up. So this really fun anecdote I have to relay real quick is I watched one of Elio and Linda's videos quite a while ago, maybe a year or two ago, about some things similar to this. And I mentioned the idea of these hybrid species, and they responded with something that they didn't mean to respond with. Elio responded with a bit about sphinxes being a creation of the Valyrians. Those aren't just statues. They made sphinxes. And I said, "Oh, wow, we didn't know that. That's cool." And blah, blah, blah. He's like, and so I think he didn't mean to give that away. And I went back to look and find that comment, and he's since deleted it. My comments are still there. Like my response is still there, but his comments is gone. So
That's really
I don't have a
interesting.
record of it anymore, but it's an admission that the Valyrians made sphinxes. So, and in some of George's other work, it is one of the tough voyaging stories contains a tale of engineered species in fighting pits. So I think that the Valyrians probably bred some of these creatures and sent them to the fighting pits for entertainment, as well as for other nefarious purposes. But anyway, so that's the kind of stuff I'm going to get into with that episode eventually. But that was really neat to see them get into to give us more info on that cool topic.
So here's the quote, and this is going to lead us into the worms. But this is it says, "What befell her on Valyria, I cannot surmise. Judging from the condition in which she returned to us, I do not even care to contemplate it. The Valyrians were more than dragon lords. They practiced blood magic and other dark arts as well, delving deep into the earth for secrets best left buried and twisting the flesh of beasts and men to fashion monstrous and unnatural chimeras. For these sins, the gods struck them down. Valyria is accursed," and it goes on and on. So there's just, yeah, like you said, more confirmation. They were definitely creating human-animal hybrids, as George Bush famously once said in a very strange State of the Union speech that was perhaps a little bit ahead of his time. Human-animal hybrids. We've got to stop them. So, yeah, the Valyrians were doing that. Yes.
So,
Thoughts, ladies?
Yeah, that's what Targaryens are. That's what dragon riders are. They're human animal hybrids.
Good ones.
Speaking of human animal
More
hybrids.
human than animal. Go ahead, Mel.
Speaking of human animal hybrids, something that I noticed happening a lot in reference to young Targaryens was a lot of child of the forest language surrounding them. I noticed that there was, sorry, I've got it in my notes. I'm so bad with the names that I'm just like, oh. Daella was nicknamed My Little Flower, which makes me think of all of the children of the forest flower names, also Craster's wives. And she's taken to the Vale, which is kind of like a hollow hill. And if the idea that we have about children of the forest being impregnated and dying in childbirth because they're trying to give birth to babies that are too large for their bodies, that's basically what happened to Daella. And there was another one of the Targ children who was a cupbearer. Was it Rhaenyra? Oh my gosh, can't remember. Anybody know? But one of the Targaryen children, like as a child, was a cupbearer to whoever was in charge at the time. And I just noticed that there was a lot of child of the forest language attached to them, which kind of surprised me.
Yeah,
That's
it was
cool.
especially with the smallness of a lot of Alisane's kids.
Mm-hmm.
Like they were either super hardy, like you were saying, or super small. But Daella, I think it was it Visera who was so small and so weak that she died? Gosh, yeah, there are a lot of new names.
There's
Yeah,
a couple of Aegons that died very young too.
I think Visera's the one that had the drunk driving accident.
Oh
Yes.
yeah, I'm sorry,
Yes.
she was the party girl.
Yeah.
She
By
was
the way, there's the Sarah, the Visera, and the Majel combined are the story of Illyrio's Sarah.
Yes.
You have the running off to the pleasure house thing, like Sarah was, that's where Illyrio met her. So the one Sarah went there, and then you have Majel dying of grayscale, and then you have Visera having the right spelling of the name Serra with the VI in front. So that's kind of cool. Of course, we kind of knew that from A World of Ice and Fire, but it was cool to get more detail on those characters.
So that confirms the Fagon Blackfire, essentially, right? Or
we'll say more confirmation. Yeah, maybe.
There's also the whole.
Go ahead.
There's also the whole bit about the dragon eggs that Alyssa's farming, who becomes Alice Highwell or something like that. I don't remember. Westhill, thank you. She takes the dragon eggs off to Pentosh, and there's a whole line of exchange between Rhaena and Jaehaerys's chambers about how some Pentoshi spicemonger is going to have 3 costly stones.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, oh my god, George.
That was surprising because I thought we had a clear answer for where those eggs came from. Because in The World of Ice and Fire, he points out that there's fossilized eggs, that Aerys had fossilized eggs. Like, oh, Varys could have just stolen those and given them to Illyrio. Simple Simon. But no, we got a much more direct reference.
Yep.
I found the quote about the other child of the forest, and it was actually Good Queen Alysanne, and she was referred to as the little maid and the other daughter. And just like
Other
Val,
daughter.
she has blue eyes and honey-colored curls. And it says she was small but never sickly, courteous, biddable, with a sweet smile and a pleasing voice. And the pleasing voice definitely made me think of the Children of the Forest too.
Yep, she's later in life. She has snowy white hair, and she has blue eyes instead of purple. She's called the Other Child. She closes down the Night Fort, and she has Snowgate renamed Queensgate. So she's got a ton of Ice Queen symbolism. We talked about that a little bit on the Fly Alaric live stream. So yeah, we saw more of that. When you have. I definitely, Melanie, when I read that she was the other child, I was like, oh, yeah, she is, isn't she? Very nice. That's cool. And of course, Jaehaerys and Alysanne had 13 children, which is like, oh, that's interesting. A little last hero math for you. One of them was named Daenerys. Okay, very interesting.
And then you have an Aemon too.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's lots of symbolic children in fact, I found the Jaehaerys and Alysanne section perhaps to be the best in the book. I really enjoyed that.
It was so good. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, just to go back to what Sandra was saying, so we know those are Dany's 3 dragon's eggs from Alyssa Farman. So that's cool. And I want to go back to Alyssa Farman and her whole voyage. That's a whole cool topic. But before we do that, we were just dipping our toes in the blood magic thing. And I want to go ahead and open up the fireworms because that's really what it relates to. So yeah, we're going to open up a can of worms.
Can I, as we're going into that, can I quickly say too, one thing I really appreciated in this book was that there's been a long running bit of misinformation that our own fandom is responsible in part for propagating, which is dealing with the issue of marriageable ages and childbirth. And George very happily set the record straight on a lot of this, which is good because it's kind of a confusing topic. The idea of women getting married too young is often mistaken because it's usually only the extreme nobility that do these really young marriages. Like day-to-day commoners, women usually wouldn't get married till they were about 20 ish, and there's a ton of records to prove that. But we have the Maesters and Alysanne both saying multiple times that these women had issues because they got pregnant too soon. So I was really glad to see that.
Yeah, that's cool. I did notice that too. And they also made a distinction between, well, they're married, but they should wait to,
the
to have
Jaehaerys
children.
and Alysanne waited like 2 or 3 years to consummate their marriage because they were young children.
True love waits, guys. True love waits.
Even though there was a political reason for them to consummate it, which is kind of unusual, but still they had a reason to be like, let's seal this up so they can't split us apart. But they still held off, so that was interesting.
Yeah.
Sandra, real quick, let's show us. I haven't checked in on your drawing at all yet. I see you've got the basic sketch, the bones of the sketch here.
Drawing in Jaehaerys now.
I love the dragons. I love how you've captured the idea of the dragons sort of like flirtily sort of rubbing on each other a little bit as they fly and sort of intertwine. It's cool. It's good.
They dance,
I thought that was really interesting. So we'll get to the worms in a second, but while we're looking at these 2 dragons here, it's interesting that some dragons belong to a couple, like Vhagar and Caraxes. Before Daemon and Aemond One-Eye killed each other with those 2 dragons, those 2 dragons belonged to a married couple, and I completely forget who they are at this point because the dragons went through a bunch of different hands. Maybe Aziz knows.
Caraxes was
Caraxes was Daemon's, and before Daemon's, it was that one girl who didn't live very long.
Alyssa.
Alyssa, yeah, and then
The second Alyssa.
Vhagar was Laenor or Laena's, and before Laena, it was there was the new one that we didn't. Oh, it was Aemon's. Yeah, it was Aemon. Aemon who was the heir to Jaehaerys and Alysanne, but died before he could inherit.
That
I
was
think.
Caraxes, and then Vhagar went to his brother Balon.
Oh, it was Craxy went to. Vhagar
Yeah.
went to Balin. Okay, cool.
Because
Right on.
Melee's the first writer of Melee's, I think, was Alyssa, and they both had blood red dragons, and they were called
Right.
like the Red Shadows or something. I literally just read through the part, which is why I remember.
Weren't they called the Bloodworms?
The Bloodworms, that's it. Thank you, Melanie.
Yeah, I got to reread over that one. So I guess my point was there's this moment where you see Vhagar and Caraxes next to each other on the same team, essentially. And then you know that later they're going to kill each other. And it was kind of sad. I had this moment of like dragon sadness where I was like, oh, little do they know they're going to rip each other's guts out. And then the tie-in is that when Vermithor, the dragon of good queen of King Jaehaerys, when Vermithor died on the battlefield, along comes Silverwing to mournfully like try to lift his wing up to try to like, you know, as if like, oh, is he dead? You know, try to make him fly again. And so you saw that the bond between Jaehaerys and Alysanne was strong enough to carry over to their dragons. So it's just, I guess my point is, it's interesting. In some cases, the dragons don't have any problem killing each other, even if they used to be friends. But in the case of Jaehaerys and Alysanne, that did carry over to their dragons, and you get the feeling like they wouldn't have fought each other, probably. You know?
Yeah.
No, they were very bonded.
You have that other. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
They have that other scene where in the blacks and the greens where it's mentioned that the dragons of the blacks, the dragons of the greens would snap at each other and hiss at each other. So yeah, it's like dogs almost, where they just really channel their master's emotions a lot. It's like, but more powerful than that, because there's also evidence that they can sense each other over long distances. It's like a third of the skin changer bond or something like that, like a weaker version of that, but similar to the dog-human relationship with a little magic thrown in.
It's also there's a part where I think Dreamfire descends somewhere near Vermithor and Silverwing, and Vermithor just screams like, "Hey, ants, dragons here." Ant, whatever, you know.
Yeah, the dragons can sense each other's presence even before they can see them. We also see a dragon sort of scream when its rider dies across the city. They're not near each other. I think it's when Rhaenyra. Is it when Rhaenyra dies?
Dreamfire screams. Yeah.
It would be Jaehaera. Yeah, Jaehaera, when Jaehaera dies. I think
Jaehaera dies. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Yeah. So there's some interesting information about the dragon and the dragon rider bond that's doled out here. And I continue to feel like, you know, especially as we uncover more evidence that Azor Ahai was trying to like break into the Weirwood net, or, you know, have a child with a Children of the Forest, Nissa, to create this dragon-blooded skin changer person, you know, kind of like Jon or Bloodraven or something. I really do think that the blood of the dragon bond might have been some sort of a mutated version of Green Sea or skin changer magic. Because
so there's a question, a really good question from the chat related to this that's pretty relevant. From Julie Best Style, she asks, is there evidence that the humans can feel what the dragons are feeling? And I don't think so. It seems like it's a one-way thing. The dragons can feel the humans, but the humans can't seem to feel what the dragons are going through. Does anyone have any contrary evidence to that? Because that seems to be right.
I wonder if there's anything about Dany when her two dragons are locked up in the pit. Does she tap into that feeling at all? But she's more closely bonded to Balerion, really. So.
Yeah, it's only Melisandre hears the scratching of Rhaegal or Viserion carving out a cave there, but there's no. Yeah, I don't think it's an emotional thing there.
Oh, that sucks, because there should be. I mean, like there should. I know, like Rhaena cared about Dreamfire intensely, and like I know that they cared about their dragons, and I feel like there should be. If it goes one way, I feel like it should go the other way, but. Maybe it's just not interpreted well or understood fully. Who knows? Maybe we'll get more info.
All I can think of is kind of like dogs and people have a similar emotional bond, but we can't smell the way that dogs smell. It just doesn't translate.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I kind of feel like in the Dragon Pit when Drogon's getting attacked, that Dany is tapping into that a little bit. I'd have to reread it to see if it's it being implied or not? That's a good question. I haven't thought about that, but
It would be well masked if so, because if you recall, she's like really, really overwhelmed before the dragon comes. She just wants to leave because it's the heat and the blood and the stench and the flies. She just hates it so much.
No, it feels more like it's the other way around, where Balerion is responding to Daenerys' feelings and coming to her. But just to be clear, I'm not suggesting that it is the same thing as skin changing. There's very clear differences. It's a much more like faint sort of psychic bond. My idea is that the ancient Valerians, or maybe even Ashai Geodonian people who created the dragon bond, used skin changer magic to do so. And so it's like a mutated form of skin changer magic. Because if you remember, some of the rumors that are around Old Town and Battle Isle and all that those clues about dragons coming there is that the ancient mariners came to Battle Isle to trade or learn from the children of the forest, or maybe to enslave them. And so you get this idea of dragon people from Ashai, from the Great Empire of the Dawn, coming to Westeros to have contact with children of the forest. And that's basically the framework and the backdrop for Nissa Nissa being a child of the forest. That's how it would happen, is through that interchange. So we've got rumors in the world of Ice and Fire, and then we've got our own sort of symbolic exploration that's both led us to this place, that these ancient dragon lords that came before Valyria were trying to tap into green sea or magic somehow, and they came to Westeros to do it. And it's probably really fucking important, because what is Jon Snow? He's a cross of skin changer genetics and blood of the dragon genetics, and that seems to be important. So, thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I'm not sure I have anything specifically to add, but I totally agree. We have the other concepts out there to sort of back this idea up, the overlap of magic in other ways. We have prophecy coming from multiple places. We have necromancy coming from multiple places. So yeah, why not psychic bonds with animals? It has a lot of those traits. It's clearly magical, but it's all, like you say, it's clearly not as powerful or as thorough as the relationship with skin changing. But yeah, I think you're right.
Because you think of like skin changing an animal. One of the long running fan theories is that Bran will warg a dragon, or not warg, but skin change a dragon. But we've seen many times that when Bran tried to skin change into his wolf, and the wolf was hurt, Bran described it as like touching a hot knife or hot iron, and you instinctively just pull away from it. And we've also seen pain and fire kick skin changers out of their bodies, like when Varamir Sixskins was burned out of his eagle. So you think about Bran trying to skin change a dragon, that might feel the same. It might feel like trying to skin change fire made flesh. It might not work. But if you're someone like Melisandre or Mokoro, or maybe Dany in the future, who's like transforming into like a fiery entity, but you have skin changer genetics, maybe that's how we create a blood of the dragon type of situation. So that's where my thinking was going there.
No, I think you're right on. I think there's the link between the dragon rider and the dragon is definitely more of a hereditary thing, especially in the fact that isn't it taboo in skin changing to like take another person's animal, like the way Varamir Sixskins would like take over other animals, and he tried to take Thistle and stuff? Or am I mixing up my myths?
Well, there's multiple taboos happening there, but go ahead.
Well, yeah, skin changing Thistle is a completely different taboo, but the point was you don't take another skin changer's warg. So for what always was interesting to me was how the dragons could be claimed by other people after they were after their riders died. Like the dragon would never have the same rider while the other one lived, but as soon as their rider died, like especially when I'm thinking of Maegor, and was it?
Well, okay, so skin changers, you're getting a couple things crossed. So skin changers, Varamir says that wolves and humans mate for life. But the thing is that after the person dies, other people can inhabit the same animal. Like a lot of the ravens in Blood Raven's Cave have singer souls in them, but Bran can skin change into them.
I was just thinking about the bond between the dragon and dragon rider being as like less monogamous as the skin changers, but never mind.
No, it's pretty monogamous. It's pretty similar, actually, because just for the simple fact that once a dragon and a rider are paired, nobody else can ride that dragon.
Right.
And we see the example of what happens when you try to. The dragon like tosses you off. It's like, no, I ain't playing that.
Yeah.
So there's definitely enough parallels to make you compare the two. But let's talk about worms. So I've got the quote pulled up here. And if you don't like parasites and stuff, then this is going to be some sort of trigger warning for you. But okay, so let's go here. And I'm even going to share my screen because the picture is really good. This is the picture. And it is terrifying. It is fully terrifying. I got to scroll backwards to read the quote, but we'll get back to this in a second. So I'll hide this. So she comes back. Let's see. I don't want to read the entire passage, but essentially she's been missing for a year. She flew off on Balerion the Black Dread. She comes back a year later, and as soon as they land, she like basically falls off the dragon. She's obviously very sick, about to pass out. Balerion has wounds, and she has some sort of fever. And then it turns out that she doesn't just have a fever, and it's not just more cowbell that will heal her. So it says, mysteries. Okay. Talking about people leaving letters. Okay. Barth wrote, "It has been 3 days since the princess perished, and I have not slept. I do not know that I shall ever sleep again. The mother is merciful, I have always believed, and the Father above judges each man justly. But there was no mercy and no justice in what befell our poor princess. How could the gods be so blind or so uncaring as to permit such horror? Or is it possible that there are other deities in this universe, monstrous, evil gods, such as the priests of Red R'hllor preach against whose malice the kings and men and gods of men are naught but flies?" And clearly that's a Lovecraft Cthulhu hat tip right there, just to point that out. And then he says, "I do not know. I do not want to know. If this makes me a faithless Septon, so be it. Grandmaster Benifer and I have agreed to tell no one all of what we saw and experienced in his chambers as that poor child lay dying. Not the king, nor the queen, nor her mother, nor even the Archmaesters of the Citadel. But the memories will not leave me, so I shall set them down here. Mayhaps by the time they are found and read, men will have gained a better understanding of such evils. We have told the world that Princess Aria died of a fever, and that is broadly true, but it was a fever such as I have never seen before and hope never to see again. The girl was burning. Her skin was flushed and red when I laid my hand upon her brow to learn how hot she was. And when I laid my hand upon her brow to learn how hot she was, it was as if I had thrust it into a pot of boiling oil. There was scarce an ounce of flesh upon her bones, so gaunt and starved did she appear, but we could observe certain swellings inside her as her skin bulged out and then sunk down again, as if, no, not as if, for this was the truth of it. There were things inside her, living things, moving and twisting, mayhaps searching for a way out, and giving her such pain that even the milk of the poppy gave her no surcease. We told the king, as we must surely tell her mother, that Aria never spoke, but that is a lie. I pray that I shall soon forget some of the things she whispered through her cracked and bleeding lips. I cannot forget how oft she begged for death. All the maester's arts were powerless against her fever, if indeed we can call such a horror by such a commonplace name. The simplest way to say it is that the poor child was cooking from within. Her flesh grew darker and darker and then began to crack until her skin resembled nothing so much, Seven save me, as pork crackling. Thin tendrils of smoke issued from her mouth, her nose, even most obscenely from her nether lips, which is a ridiculous phrase, nether lips. It communicates the prudishness of the maesters very well. In any case, by then, she had ceased to speak, though the things within her continued to move. Her very eyes cooked within her skull and finally burst like two eggs left in a pot of boiling water for too long. Hello, Two Moons reference. I thought that was the most hideous thing that I should ever see, but I was quickly disabused of the notion, for a worse horror was awaiting me. That came when Benifer and I lowered the poor child into a tub and covered her with ice. The shock of that immersion stopped her heart at once, I tell myself. If so, that was a mercy, for that was when the things inside her came out. The things! Mother have mercy. I do not know how to speak of them. They were worms. Worms with faces. Snakes with hands. Twisty, slimy, unspeakable things that seemed to writhe and pulse and squirm as they came bursting from her flesh. Some were no bigger than my little finger, but one, at least, was as long as my arm. Oh, warrior, protect me. The sounds they made. They died, though. I must remember that. Cling to that. Whatever they might have been, they were creatures of heat and fire, and they did not love the ice. Oh, no. One after another, they thrashed and writhed and died before my eyes. Thank the seven. I will not presume to give them names. They were horrors. And then it goes on to talk about speculating that she may have gone to Valeria. And then they talk about the fact that Balerion had a wound, which was like a 9-foot long gouge along his side, which is kind of crazy. It says half-healed scars and a jagged rent down his left side, almost 9 feet long, a gaping red wound from which his blood still dripped, hot and smoking. So, guys,
I have thoughts.
yikes. Yeah, go ahead, Sanri.
I pulled this as one of my things I wanted to talk about too, because the way the worms are described sounds way too similar to the way that Maegor's twisted offspring are described and all of the deformed babies. And it's really scary. What the hell is in Valeria? That's just what I want to know. Like, what is out there that could hurt Balerion at that age in his life? And I feel like it's more proof that something bad during, or whatever happened during the Doom of Valeria, whatever remains there, those creepy fireworms can live. And those might be like dragons or whatever remains of the people, or some kind of horrible intermingling of them. And this is literally complete crack foil, so please forgive me. But yes, I had a lot of thoughts that made me think a lot about the deformed children, at least.
Well, so let's go in order because there's a ton of things to unpack here. But the first thing you said was that you compared it to Maegor's baby. So do you said you have that quote pulled?
I had the quote pulled that you just read. But Maegor's babies are described. The first one, I think, has no eyes and malformed limbs. The second one has like no limbs and might have eyes. And the third has rudimentary wings. So they're all deformed, and like the snake-like language, snakes with hands is what worms with faces. Like, they seem similar to the deformations. Like,
well, and remember what I said about sphinxes, and remember what a sphinx is. A sphinx has a human head and a dragon's body. At least a Valyrian sphinx does. There's obviously other types of sphinxes, but so that's what we're seeing. These are like very Valyrian sphinx-like, if they're half human, half lizard, or half dragon. Which, of course, we already have some evidence of the Targaryens themselves being that way. But this just deepens the whole thing.
Yeah, this really sounds like one of those attempts at creating the blood of the dragon that like went wrong. Like, this was one of the failed experiments. At some point, they created this hideous parasite that now haunts Valeria. It could be that all baby fireworms start off like this, and that fireworms are like xenomorphs, and they need human hosts to gestate. I tend to think not. I tend to think this is a slightly different species of thing, but that's purely just, I'm just me guessing. I don't know that is the case. Some people are wondering if maybe Balerion didn't actually go to Valeria, but somewhere else, like Gagassos or Sothorios, because Sothorios is full of parasites, and Gagassos is where we heard about the very worst Valerian blood magic happening. However, I tend to think that it makes the most sense that Balerion did go to Valeria for just the reason that the Maester puts forward, which is that dragons are known to return to the places of their birth. That's where Balerion was born. And if he was the one calling the shots and flying wherever he wanted to, that's the place that would make the most sense. There's really no reason for him to fly to Gagassos. We've never seen that he's been to Gagassos. It's just an island in the sea. So I think it's far more likely he went to Valeria. Aziz, I see you nodding your head. And Melanie, go ahead.
About Balerion going to Valyria, there was a line really close by the passage that you just read that emphasized that Balerion was the last living creature to see Valyria. And like, there was a lot of emphasis on that. So that kind of pointed me in the direction of Balerion going to Valyria. I'm kind of coming at it from a different angle. and comparing Arya's journey and Arya's journey. I mean, their names are really similar and their personalities are pretty similar. But I kind of like the idea of how Arya takes on the faces of the faceless men. And she can skin change cats and whatnot. So Arya is skin changing other things, whereas Arya is in a really creepy and nasty way being skin changed by things. So they're kind of like flipped that way.
And you have the faceless men were probably the ones to cause the doom thing too, which is a nice little tie in here if Arya had to go back there. Also, you could say that this is a bit of a flip as to what we might expect from Arya herself. The longest standing piece of foreshadowing we have for her is that she will be found in the snow clutching her sword. And so if she's killed by, extreme ice, which that's kind of what happened. They put her in ice and then she died fine. Like she would have obviously died anyway. But it makes me think of Arya's foreshadowed end as well.
Oh, Mallory's got the quote for us about Balerion. And it says, recall, if you will, that Balerion was the largest and oldest of the 3 dragons that King Aegon and his sisters rode to conquest. He is mayhaps, there's so much mayhaps, the only living creature in the world that knew Valyria before the doom. So,
not to use the show as a reference too often, but we did see Drogon, instead of going to Dragon Mount, his new Dragon Mount, like he did in the books on the Dothraki Sea, he went to Valyria in the show, which is kind of neat. Although he wasn't born there.
So the other thing that these weird worms reminded me of is one of the last Targaryen dragons that was born.
Yep.
So check this out. The first omen of the dark times to come was seen on Driftmark, when the dragon's egg presented to Laena Velaryon upon her birth quickened and hatched. Her parents' pride and pleasure quickly turned to ash, however. The dragon that wriggled from the egg was a monstrosity, a wingless worm, maggot white and blind. Within moments of hatching, the creature turned upon the babe in her cradle and tore a bloody chunk from her arm. As Laena shrieked, Lord Oakenfist ripped the dragon off her, flung it to the floor, and hacked it to pieces. So this is, it really does seem like George R. R. Martin is into Aliens, the movie. First of all,
there's a lot of horror in this book in general.
but it just we see that, like, when the whole human dragon thing goes wrong, you get various weird worm-like things, from the dragon babies to the parasites to this deformed dragon. There's this certain continuity of a feel to it. So that's to me how I was viewing these parasites. So it makes sense to me that these are the types of things in Valyria. I picture Arya and Balerion riding, they're flying through the air forever and ever. Arya's holding on for dear life. She's realized by now that this was a huge mistake. And they sit down somewhere in Valyria. And what's she going to do? She's going to get off the dragon. And as soon as she does, she's at risk. If she drinks any water, if she eats anything, she touches the ground, these kinds of nasty things are probably all over Valyria. So,
can I pose everybody a question?
Please.
Related to this, does this change your thinking on whether or not Euron went to Valyria now that we know it's actually possible? Because I think before we thought it wasn't even literally, like, you would just die from smoke inhalation or heat. Now we know that apparently it might be possible. So that whole Euron thing has to be revisited. And
you have to wonder about Euron's capability to protect himself with magic in a way that Arya might not have been able to. And he might not have had to sail into the heart of Valyria either, but simply, come to one of its islands. But I still think it's entirely possible he didn't go there, and it's he's lying. So it just makes it possible rather than I thought we could be like pretty sure he was like almost certain he did. Now we're like, wait a sec, maybe he did. Sort of unrelated, but sort of related is when we were talking about the shivers before, it causes blue lips. So thinking of Euron.
Nice.
Yeah, that was one of the descriptions of it, is that lips turn blue. I'm like, oh, hello.
I think there might be an interesting hint about the Euron thing in that Arya has blood eyes. So she's got blood in her eyes, like Euron with a blood eye.
Good catch.
So I thought, at least linguistically, there's supposed to be a symbolic parallel there, if nothing else.
And Arya is very much a dragon locked in ice symbol when she's got dragons inside her like a moon, and she's surrounded by ice, and then the dragons sort of burst out. So that's cool.
She's heralded by 3 horn blasts as well.
Yep.
Oh yeah, I totally missed that. Someone else pointed out. I was like, oh man, how did I miss that? 3 horn blasts.
So Carol just dropped a $2 super chat asking about grayscale. You must have hopped in, I think, probably a little bit late, Carol. We actually did do a pretty good little grayscale discussion near the beginning. So I would say just listen back when the stream is over, and thank you for joining us.
Hey, look at the number of people you got.
Yes, 227. Thank you, everybody. The attendance has been soaring lately. It has been climbing up and up, and it's another thing that I'm thankful for. So
I think having it regular really helps with that. I've noticed that you do, like, if people could count on it, they remember it ahead of time. It's kind of part of the routine. Certainly is for me. I'm like, oh, hey, it's Sunday. I mean, let me check out Between Two Werewoods.
it does make it easy. Yes, I'm trying to make it easy, guys. And as we were discussing on Twitter, the enthusiasm for football is like it's kind of gotten harder to get as fired up about it as it used to be, with all the concussions and wife beating, being swept under the rug, and some of the other ugliness. Not to like change it totally, but yeah, it's fun to do something on Sunday, and the whole church angle is kind of funny. We had the whole Starry Wisdom Church thing going on, and oh, look at the time. So in any case, Melanie, tell me about, what do you think, this is another thing. Okay, so the worms here have an adverse reaction to the ice, and Silverwing, when Alysanne is on Silverwing, not only turns away from the wall, but like growls at the cold wind coming off the wall. So is George like giving us some clues here that the dragons aren't just going to have this cakewalk and just march in and just roast everything? Like, what do you think about that?
Absolutely, totally agree. Thank you. Yeah, that was there's no way, after seeing that horrific thing with Arya, there's no way that the dragons are going to just be like popping in and roasting everybody beyond the wall. It would be really interesting to see Daenerys heading to the wall, trying to help everybody, thinking that she's going to save the day, and then completely failing.
Yeah, the dragons are like, no.
Nope.
No, Mom, I don't want to go over there. It's cold.
Stubborn
It was
dragon.
also, we also got that from Jace's dragon was also having trouble up there.
But yeah.
Oh, yeah, I forget. What was that part about?
I'm not sure.
Sorry, I was coughing due to the time of day. I think is it Vermax? Yeah, Vermax also, when he flew up to with the whole Pact of Ice and Fire thing with Cregan, Vermax is also hating the cold and snapping and being difficult. So we have 2 examples of that.
Wow, that really okay. So I'm spawning tinfoil like right now in my mind. But
Do it.
Is it possible that aliens? No, not aliens. Is it possible that the whole idea of Dany and or Jon turning into a Night's Queen and or Night's King, is it possible that is something that they need to do in order to be able to ride an ice dragon to fuck the others up? So instead of the TV show where Night's King rides the ice dragon, maybe the ice dragon is what you actually need. I don't know. It's probably too many layers of tinfoil, but
but also you have no, go ahead. My answer is a little off topic, so go ahead.
I was gonna say that dovetails really nicely with the idea of Bran and the shivers and everybody thinking that Bran is going to skin change a dragon. If there's 3 ice dragons being controlled by Jon, Daenerys, and Bran, then they might work out that way.
That makes sense. I was going to say that with the idea of Dany turning into the Night Queen is interesting, because then it means if someone like Jon has to kill her, it isn't necessarily an evil act anymore. If she's been transformed into something, it isn't like, the idea that Azor Ahai committed an evil act, which I think is a very valid possibility. In this case, it might not be if she's just turned, like, magically forced into being evil and like spreading. Like I made a similar theory for Shireen. If Shireen just starts dropping grayscale everywhere, if she's just a patient zero and spreading it everywhere, they may have to kill her, and it won't just be a sacrifice because Stannis is, there's bad weather, or Stannis feels like he has no choice. There may be a compelling reason specific to her, that she needs to die because she has grayscale. And something could be, you know, maybe that idea applies to Dany in this sense as well. I don't know. It's just definitely just a theory at this point.
And we found all this symbolism about the good other, the idea that the Starks have some blood of the other, and yet they fight against the others. You know, Jon has a lot of foreshadowing that he's going to be some sort of more of a unification of ice and fire, not just a barrack. But you know, he has the burning sword, but he's armored in ice. You know, he's got a constant juxtaposition of ice and fire. So I'm definitely curious to see what that goes. To me, the idea that one or both of Dany and Jon could turn into Night's King or Night's Queen, it doesn't necessarily mean that they'll be becoming evil. Because when I'm saying Night's King and Queen, I'm really talking about Ice King and Ice Queen. We have to remember Cold Hands is an Ice White on the good team, team life, if you will. So there's, you know, we might see Jon take on a Night's King symbolism, but actually not be fighting for the others, but against them. Or it could be that he's got to become the Night's King to pacify the others and sort of take them back, like the whole prince that was promised to the others idea. You know, Jon becoming icy will pacify them somehow. So all those ideas are possible. And here's another thing that I'm even more sure of that's less tinfoily is that, okay, check this out. So in the show, Jon and Dany are knocking boots and they're going to have a baby, right? Well, in the books, we don't expect Whited Jon to be able to have babies, probably. Dany's ability to have a baby is also very much in dispute. It seems less likely in the books than it did in the show. So you have to wonder, maybe they're going to have a magical baby instead, like a shadow baby, or they're going to create an other, or create a fire other, or some fucking weird thing like that. Like, it may be that both of them, by the time they meet and fall in love, will be both semi-magical beings at that point, and the kind of child they have is not just going to be a regular baby. Thoughts? Anybody?
Magic baby. I like it.
We've gotten, it might relate to some of this crazy, weird, you know, we've been seeing all the ways babies can come out. This might be sort of a setup towards something along those lines, but maybe not. That's kind of tough.
Well, it sort of ties in. So Pablo's mentioning that some people think Maegor might have been actually resurrected by Tyaina of the Tower after he was in that coma, and he was unable to have any regular babies. I'm not sure if I subscribe to that, but she definitely used.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I have two thoughts on that. One, Maegor is a strong parallel to Gregor. Not only the name sound, it just you switch the first two letters, Maegor, Gregor. But you have same thing. Gregor was supposed to be dead, and all of a sudden he's walking around doing stuff. You have, and you in both cases you have a sorceress type person that took care of them to get them back. It's Qyburn or Tyaina of the Tower, and in both cases they were like Maegor was out for 28 days, and in both cases it was a trial by combat that put them in this spot in the first place. So it's really rich with parallels. Plus you have you know, they're both huge, they both were knighted early, they're both brutal, they both had an incident with a horse when they were, you know, it's just like even little details like that. But backing it up to our blood magic discussion and engineered species discussion, Visenya was rumored to use black magic.
Yep.
And we know that a really common result of mixing black magic / blood magic with this whole created engineered species things is that you create sterile animals. Like you know, we hear of the Ibonese mating with people, and that's just, they create sterile humans. Like in real life, you have what is it, mules that are sterile?
Mules.
Yep. Yeah, because it's a mating of a donkey and a horse. So Maegor just might have been either engineered or resurrected, and either of those things could make him unable to procreate. So yeah, it's a lot of possibilities there.
I think it's both. I have always thought that Visenya did something magic to make Maegor. Like, I mean, especially as she grows older, and especially reading through the Sons of the Dragon chapter, they definitely added stuff for.
Oh yeah.
There's so much more, like, that makes me feel like he is something that is engineered from blood magic rather than he is something that is true and pure, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's Aegon's whole situation is weird with not having a kid till he was 27 and only
Yeah.
having one kid with each wife, even though he like slept with Rhaenys constantly. And then there's question, and then we have in the book, both books, World of Ice and Fire and Sons of the Dragon, or Fire and Blood, we have the Maesters and mentioning rumors that Rhaenys, you know, had lovers that may
That
have
were
been
singers.
responsible for Aenys. Yeah, so
Who came out
Aegon the
weak.
Conqueror might have been sterile, like straight up.
So
Well-
check this out. Check this out. I've got some super chats I need to get before I slip my mind
Oh,
any
yeah, wow.
further. Mazamonti on topic says, "Let me give you some advice, bastard. Never forget what you are. The rest of the world will not. Wear it like armor." So that's Tyrion's famous advice to Jon. So remember what you are. Wear it like armor. Jon has ice armor. What is Jon?
Ooh.
He's ice. Very
Cool,
nice.
nice.
Thank you, Mazamonti. Then earlier, Vorian Betterfetter gave a super chat of appreciation. Just says, thanks for being awesome. So thank you, Vorian. And Lauren S. says, Alice Rivers' new bits were pretty interesting. Yeah, they were. Alice Rivers is a very interesting character. So let's talk about that next. But real quick, before we change topic, here's another tinfoil, since we're throwing out tinfoil today. It once occurred to me, Aziz, that the black dragons might be a race apart from the other dragons. They are bigger, consistently bigger, and more aggressive. And the way that Balerion is set apart from the other two is constantly emphasized. He's a loner, flies off by himself, growing bigger and faster. And so I wondered if maybe, like, you know, the Great Empire of the Dawn seems to have been dragon riders before the Long Night. But I wonder if the Bloodstone Emperor, being like the prototype for so many things of Valyria, especially if he's really Azor Ahai, as I believe, and that whole blood magic ritual that created Lightbringer was part of him killing the Amethyst Empress and all that. I wonder if maybe like he sort of set the template for the Valyrians by creating these black swords with blood magic, and maybe by creating the black dragons with because he was said to do necromancy and all the darkest sorcery and all that stuff. So maybe that's where that all started, that human animal hybrid stuff. Because they basically like attribute everything to the Bloodstone Emperor that you can think of, as far as like all the dark arts and stuff. So
we have
check
we
this.
have
so
three
check this
black
out.
dragons. Is it 3 black dragons that we have?
So there's Cannibal, there's
and Balerion and
Balerion,
Drogon.
and Drogon. And nobody rides Cannibal, but Cannibal's huge and monstrous and kills other dragons.
Yeah. I think you might be onto something there. Yeah.
So then the last clue about it is that everyone who rides black dragons might be infertile. Just what you said. So Aegon, it's rumored that Rhaenys slept with other people. So Rhaenys' children might not be Aegon's. And he only conceived with Visenya. I'll give this to you, Melanie, next. He only conceived with Visenya because of sorcery, quite possibly. And then you have Maegor riding the black dragon. And Daenerys riding a black dragon. And she can't have children anymore, although those two things aren't necessarily linked. But I just wondered about that. So Melanie, go ahead. I see you raising your hand here.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about the idea of dragon seeds. Like, just the word itself is kind of telling. And dragon seeds are Targaryen bastards, basically kids that are created by a Targaryen on a common person, or like just a random non-Targ person. And it's said in the books that dragon seeds are children who are to be cherished and taken care of, and are, you know, like the Targaryen exceptionalism, so special. Like, the name dragon seeds got me thinking, and I think it works very well with this idea that perhaps Aegon the Conqueror was not actually, he was sterile and wasn't able to produce children, and that all of the Targaryens that followed from Rhaenys' line were, and maybe even Visenya's line, although that's like the black magic thing, are maybe actually bastards and don't have pure Targaryen blood.
Well, definitely on Maegor's line died out. He had no successors and no heirs.
Yeah, that's true.
And like they make note to describe Aenys when he's born as being like frail and thin and weakly. And then when Jaehaerys is born, they're like, he's so much more like his grandsire, like Aegon,
Stronger.
like stronger and stuff. Yeah.
So maybe in order to make a dragon, you have to plant a dragon seed.
Yeah, the dragons and trees cross symbolism is just wonderful. It keeps on giving and giving. So how about that one, just as a silly aside, how about that one where one of the Targaryen kings sat on a dragon's egg to try to hatch it, literally sat on it like a hen?
So it's actually referenced a couple of times that the dragons are referred to as chickens, like because like it's about 3 times in the books, and that got me thinking about cockatrices and just more dragon cock talk, and that made me chuckle.
Cockatrices they're like basilisks, like sphinxes, kind of.
Yeah.
Joe Magician, what are you saying about cannibal? Let me scroll up. I missed what you were saying.
There's the mention of Cannibal being older than having been on Dragonstone before the Targaryens, which is dismissed as a rumor. So probably not, but it's an interesting idea.
Yeah, you think, because I kind of want to think that dragons exist naturally in Planetos. I realize that they could have been created from fireworms and wyverns, just as Barth proposes. Obviously, we know the Valerians were doing crossbreeding, so that's possible. But part of me thinks it's very plausible that dragons are a naturally existent creature. Because if you have fireworms, why not dragons? They're just fireworms with wings. Like they're not any more magical. So
it's not that big of a stretch.
Right. They could be natural creatures. And then what the Valerians, or what the Bloodstone Emperor did, was at some point they created this blood of the dragon bond. They mingled the genetics of humans and dragons somehow in a way that allows them to bond, quote unquote. And so I just thought that maybe part of that, the black dragons are the result of an experiment, because everything about them is so wrong. Like they breathe black fire, which doesn't even really make sense.
Like, what is that?
Black dragon hate here, Luce.
Cool.
Oh, I love black dragons. What are you talking about? I love them. Come on now.
So,
by the way,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, to add to your theory, I was thinking about the other riders of Balerion. We have Viserys the First, who obviously had a lot of kids, but he wasn't really. It suggests that he never even necessarily rode Balerion, because Balerion was still messed up from his trip with Area, and so Viserys claimed him, but he died within a year of that. So
yeah, that's pointed out in the books, like that he only got to like ride him up once, and then like rode him down, and that was it.
Yeah, so the whole it's sort of a thorn in the they're all sterile, but barely, because he hardly rode him, So I don't know. It's still pretty much.
It's pretty like out there theory, and I don't know if it'll ever come into play, but it's just where my mind went one time.
Right.
So.
Well, it's not like logistically feasible, but it could be thematically. Like George could be written it that way on purpose. So that that sense, I think it could fit really well.
Right, because we just was like, who else wrote Balerion? Oh, this girl named Arya. How'd that turn out? Not very well. So all right, Emma, let me kick it to you. What bring up a topic that you'd like to talk about, and I'm going to click into Sanrixian a little bit as we talk.
So one thing I consistently noticed was Mushroom as a soothsayer of some description. Like everything he seems to say seems to have like vast amounts of symbolic importance. I've not got my passages to hand. But there was one about like being ruled by a jester now, and things like that. And I just wondered like what everyone's take on sort of the idea of another fool as soothsayer, and Mushroom as well, being a dwarf, potentially has like, he's called Mushroom, which gives him children or werewood net symbolism. And being a dwarf, he's essentially like a small statured person who looks older than they are, and he manages to see events that he really shouldn't be seeing in the slightest. So there's quite a lot of sort of symbolism sort of around him, and I thought that was really cool.
I think that's really interesting, Emma, because a couple of things, like looking at Mushroom as, like you're saying, a soothsayer, and having him privy to knowledge that he doesn't necessarily should not necessarily have access to, kind of makes you get a Greenseer vibe from him. And the small stature makes you think like, child of the forest. And then on top of that, I know that it's kind of been shared in our general circle, like with the starry wisdom, but there's the idea of the dwarf people that people see after ingesting, I think it's flyalaric mushrooms, and going into like tripping.
The self-transforming machine elves.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
just, yeah, kind of all of those things mushed together and mixed back around make me think of mushroom.
Completely agree in terms of symbolism. That, yeah, he seems like one of those, maybe symbolic of a child of the forest human hybrid offspring who's sort of doing both things. But yeah, it's a lot of the same symbolism. Like Patchface has all that child of the forest symbolism too. He's childlike but old. He was a child that could sing and do magic. He's got the red and green motley. He's got the horns. He's voice of prophecy. So he's got the whole sort of shamanic madness, one ear into the spirit world sort of thing going on. So Mushroom is less overt because he's not crazy. But what George is doing is he's using him as an oracle because everything he says is highly symbolic, like you said, Melanie. So that's really cool. And just going back to the idea of dragons being a natural creature, KFA 4303 points out that the best proof of dragons being, real animals, quote unquote, is that they existed over a broad time on Planetos. Supposedly, we find dragon skeletons all over the world from ancient times, even in Westeros, say the Maesters. So that tells you that, like, in some prehistoric time, dragons seem to have been everywhere in the way that dinosaurs were. So unless Jesus is hiding dragon bones, just in the way that he's hiding them under Antarctica or whatever, dinosaur bones. So
he's sneaky, that Jesus.
Yeah, he is. He's a good scuba diver. So it's a good excavator too. In any case, so that's a good point. And there's the tie into that was that Sunfire, when Sunfire was wounded, one of his wounds starts to mortify and rot, and his smoke even like smells all nasty and stuff. So the fact that dragons can become infected and mortified like that kind of points to them being a quote unquote, a magical natural creature, as opposed to just a being of pure fire like the others are beings of ice or whatever. So what'd you think about that?
There might be differences between the dragons that we know now and the dragons that used to exist, or that could simply speak to what the Targaryens did in order to bond to the dragons. Like, it could be more like a Targaryen-sided thing than it is a dragon-sided thing. As we were talking about earlier, with the dragons seeming to be able to feel the Targaryens more than the Targaryens being able to feel the dragons' emotions. That just makes me feel like there's more tricky blood magic shit that went on the side of the Targaryens to make the dragons bond to them and to yield to them.
Yeah, I think that's unquestionably the case. I just thought it was interesting that we saw the dragon's wound actually rotting, because I don't think you'd see an other's wound like rot and like mortify, right? Like,
we haven't even seen them be wounded. Like, they just drop into a puddle.
Right. Exactly.
They're either unhurt or puddles.
Right. Does anybody want to add anything on this topic? I want to get Alice Rivers, and then Sandry's got a good idea here about Krakens I want to get to also.
I have just one very quick comment about, I'm not nearly as strong as y'all on detecting symbolism, but my one contribution was Mushroom's relating his attempt to mount Silverwing and having his pantaloons catch fire as a result. And all I could think of was, that's a liar, pants on fire reference. And in the text, the Maesters doubt that this happened too. I'm like, yeah, well, when you attach liar, pants on fire, then that suggests the Maesters are right to doubt it. So generally it seems that Mushroom is reliable on things that he witnesses, but he'll just make shit up about things he wasn't there for. But there's exceptions, I'm sure, to that.
Oh, Mushroom.
So, yeah, and whatever, and I just respond to Jojo Lady Dane asking about the others being made of purely ice. Yes, they are, in the sense that they melt. When you stab them, they entirely melt. Like, the bones don't stick around underneath. The bones melt too. Everything melts away. So obviously what goes into creating another is a complex question. But their physical body is made entirely of ice at this point. Yes, because they melt when stabbed. And the dragons, I don't think you'll see a dragon like vaporize into like mist or something. Like, if you kill a dragon, its body is there as a dead corpse. So there's definitely a difference there, I guess was my point. But let's do the Alice Rivers one, because that Alice Rivers is awesome. And there was a few cool witchy woman witchy women in this book, which I really enjoyed. We're getting beyond just the simple fact of like, so and so was murdered and blamed for everything, and they cut off her nipples and called her a witch, and because she was from the east. Like we're getting a little bit beyond that. So let's talk about Alice Rivers. Who wants to kick it off? What would one of the ladies like to start?
Emma, Mel.
I would
take
love
it.
to, but I haven't made it that far. I
Oh.
tried really hard, but I didn't.
I guess that is towards the end. That's true.
Sorry.
So,
Yeah.
well, just to give everybody an idea, Alice Rivers, but previously we had seen her show up with Aemond One Eye at the Battle of the God's Eye. When Aemond lands at Harrenhal to fight Daemon and Caraxes, he's got a woman on the dragon with him named Alice Rivers, who it's vaguely rumored that she's a witch. But she turns up a bunch more in this story. And so, and I'm trying to remember all the different places she turned up, but she also, after that battle over the God's Eye, Harrenhal, nobody paid attention to Harrenhal. She basically took power in Harrenhal and organized all the thieves and cutthroats and random people that were there and was ruling it as her little fiefdom. And she claimed to be pregnant with Aemond One Eye's kid. So that was cool. Aziz, what else did we get about? I know you've got the best memory.
Well, we've got this really blatant example of magic where this messenger comes back reporting to the crown saying, this is what I learned there, but if anyone laughs, I'm going to die. And someone laughed and he died. It was like, what on earth? This is like, it's not quite like Bridge of Dream level, like magic, just blatant with no other possible explanation. Like you can't look at that and think it's something else besides magic unless it's just completely made up, which there's no reason to think that either.
Right. There were witnesses. The guy definitely dropped dead in the middle of a room. There's no question. Yeah. There was a bunch of sober people around that saw it happen. So that's really powerful magic. Yeah. And
we have this parallel to Danelle Lawston with the idea of she bathes in blood to keep her youth, which is a common trope for any woman who looks good after a certain age. They just think, oh, she's a witch. She looks good after age 30. What's going on here? This can't be possible.
Blood.
But it's also Harrenhal. So it kind of like, well, and given that she has quite clearly demonstrated real magic, then, well, maybe she is preserving her youth with
well, here you go. Maybe she's born with it. Maybe it's blood magic.
Maybe it's a blood magic.
Maybe it's witchy shit. In any case, Alice Rivers was cool. Another sort of potentially witchy woman, not super witchy, but definitely a visionary woman, was of course Alyssa Farman.
Oh, so cool.
A woman who tried to sail, or possibly did sail, across the Sunset Sea. So Melanie, you said you were ready to go on this one, so I'll let you start it. But yeah, tons to talk about here.
I am. Oh my gosh, I love Alyssa Farman. First of all, I'm just really happy. I'm gonna talk about it a little tiny bit. I'm really happy that George had a little bit more representation of non-straight women in the text. There was a little bit of women-loving women action going on there, which was great. And thank you, George, for listening to all of your female fans who have been asking for more of that. But apart from that, there was one scene, the scene where Alyssa Farman is sailing off on Sun Chaser with the Autumn Moon and the Lady Meredith. And there was so much mythical astronomy going on in this scene that my jaw just dropped. And I was like, what's going on here? So the Sun Chaser sails off ahead, and the Lady Meredith and the Autumn Moon are left behind to deal with this horrible storm. And in the midst of this storm, you have these, I'm looking at the Autumn Moon and the Lady Meredith as two moons. And one of the moons is struck by lightning because there's this vengeful storm god thing going on. And it's almost like the two moons were getting too close to the sun. I'm sorry, I'm horrible at explaining mythical astronomy, and I feel like you should be doing this.
You're doing fine. You're doing fine. No, carry on.
But so the two moons are chasing the sun. They get too close to the sun. They're struck down by lightning in the midst of this gigantic storm. And from beneath, all of the sailors on the Autumn Moon claim to see kraken arms grabbing the ship Lady Meredith and dragging her beneath the waves. And to me, I was just like, wow, that's basically everything that we've been talking about as far as mythical astronomy goes. And then just to bring up really quickly something that I noticed in relation to the King Under the Mountain myth, I noticed that later the Sun Chaser, the next place that the Sun Chaser shows up, or next piece of land that they find, is 3 islands. 2 of them were hills and 1 was a mountain, and had birds circling around the top. And I was like, oh, that's definite King Under the Mountain symbolism because of the circling birds and it being a hill. And it was kind of like this liminal realm, kind of like Avalon, where there was like all this food and a bounty of natural resources, and almost like a paradise, sort of like a Vase Teloro, where Daenerys hangs out in this kind of like, limbo area. And it's still a land of death because there's like these poisonous lizards and other hazards on this island. Anyway, yeah.
I was catching shades of like Voyage of the Dawn Treader too, like Narnia.
I can see that, yeah.
And which is inspired by certain Greek myths and stuff. And Blue Tiger in the chat points out that Alyssa Farman is probably a reference to Queen Alyssa of Carthage, a Nymeria-like character who fled Tyre because her brother stole her throne and founded Carthage. And I know Blue Tiger is actually working on some of the parallels to Aeneas, who founded Rome, right? Am I talking right?
I think so, yeah.
Sort of, yeah. I'm
That's
sorry.
that's the yeah.
Yeah. So fortunately, it won't be me writing it, but Blue Tiger, who knows his history a little better in that regard. But there's definitely some really cool Rome, Carthage parallels that are happening. And a lot of it ties into the Great Empire of the Dawn and the Lord of the Rings parallels, Numenor and all that stuff, because it's all about like sort of leaving one place and founding a new city and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So look for that from Blue Tiger, the Tolkienic Song of Ice and Fire, or what is it? What's the name of that? I'll get the link. Hang on a second. Yeah.
He also just started his Advent series, I think. I don't know if it's posted yet. Maybe
But it's coming up.
Insider knowledge, but
While you're looking that up, I'll say real quick that I was so excited to see a Kraken scene because we've talked about the possibility, not just the possibility, but the likelihood of Krakens in the Winds of Winter. It's been talked about by so many people so many times. We've got Krakens mentioned by Varys, by many different sailors, by Tumco Low of all people. Just they come up a lot of places. And now we actually see one, and we all know that Fire and Blood is full of foreshadowing for the Winds of Winter, and it's very tempting to see this as more confirmation that we're going to see Krakens.
Thank you, Aziz, because I was so stoked about the Krakens, and we don't just hear about them once; we hear about them like early on, and then we hear about them again through the book, and that made me think of Lodos Twice Drowned. Because we had just mentioned Patchface, and I thought he was such a funny character in the beginning because he's like, well, I'm going to go meet with my dad again and get some information. And then he comes back, maybe.
People follow him, too. Like, what the hell?
Like, yeah, he might really be a prophet of the drowned god. That would be so cool. But I don't think he is. But I love
the TV show Archmaester's making fun of him. That was a nice little touch. Like, Lodos. That was
perfect.
I was a big fan of the Maester scenes on the show. I thought they captured the quarreling, detached old man vibe very well. So I dug it.
Yes.
All right. So let's see here. Did you have more you wanted to say about? So Krakens. There's also a sea dragon sighting too, which makes me think that maybe the sea dragon is not just. I mean, obviously it's a lot of symbolism, but I was assuming there wasn't actually a sea dragon, and that it was only symbolism, but. It may be that there are, leviathans, sea dragons, sea serpents.
Yeah. They specifically say leviathans as something different in these books, unless I had a fire and blood dream and went crazy.
Well, okay, no. So let me clarify. It's there. So they use the word leviathan to refer to whales most often. Leviathan, both in the real world and in A Song of Ice and Fire, can be used very casually for any large sea monster. Hence the application to whales. Several overweight people in the story are called leviathans or yellow whales, but the classic biblical leviathan is more like a sea dragon. It's a multi-headed sea serpent type thing. The word Leviathan literally means twisted, coiled, or folded in on itself. And that has to do with the coils of a snake. And that's based on other sea serpent myths in the Middle East, and Canaanite myth, Greek myth, Sumerian myth, stuff like that. So the word Leviathan is complex. People use it on the surface level mostly to talk about whales in A Song of Ice and Fire. Like, they don't even say big whales. They usually say Leviathan. But separately, there seems to be sea dragons, which fits the biblical Leviathan description. And there's Leviathan symbolism stuff. So
here's a quote, helpful quote. We have Brandon and the Ironborn, or Brandon the shipwright and the Ironborn who came after him had both sailed the northern seas, where monstrous krakens, sea dragons, and leviathans the size of islands swam through cold gray waters. So yeah, you're right. It's used different ways here, both as a generic and as a, but it specifically says sea dragons. I mean, that's
awesome.
Blatant, straight up.
Some people wonder if maybe Martin is thinking about a plesiosaur when he says Leviathan, but I'm pretty sure they say even great gray whales, the Leviathans of the sea, or something like. So
yeah,
like I said, Leviathan can be used loosely too for just any large thing that's like a sea monster. So
it's the other reference to Leviathans in Fire and Blood sounds like whales, because it says there's a pod of Leviathans. One of them, a huge white bull larger than a ship, had slammed into Lady Meredith of a purpose. Yeah, so yep.
Those sound like whales, right, to me.
Yeah, a pod. Yeah, the word pod certainly sounds like whales to me, yeah.
But it's cool. It sounds like there's all kinds of crap swimming around in the sea. There's baby beluga and sea dragons and all of it. So yeah. I'm into it. I dig it. So to go back to Alyssa Farman, this was the most riveting personal story in the book, I have to say. Like, the whole idea of sailing west over the sea is just like fantasy crack, catnip for us. And then not only does she find an island, which is really exciting, and then you've got the whole, like, I don't know, I just love stories where it's like only 40 people in a spaceship, like sailing off to some new world. And it's like this little insular community, and there's all this little drama set against this backdrop of like, we don't know where we're going. It's the same thing here, where it's like, you've got these 3 ships, they're sailing off into nowhere. They don't know what's happened. They reach the little island and they're like, well, we found an island. Should we go back? And by the way, that's what I would have done, is I would have gone back and then come back to that little island with more supplies and built it up as a way station, and then explored further from there. That would have been the smart thing to do. But she wanted to, grab it all and chase the sun. So she kept sailing. The other people, the Hightowers, wanted to go back. Like, I was just really riveted to that story. And then at the very end, you get to the point where we don't know what happened to her. Well, except that Corlys Velaryon will swear to his dying day that he saw a boat in a shy that could only be Sun Chaser. Like, whoa, she made it. She made it.
Wow, that's so cool.
I saw in some context, I don't remember what.
Oh, Sammy just disappeared into the void.
The void has swallowed her. You don't speak of Ashai lightly. This is what happens. The shadow swallowed her up.
I'm sure she'll be.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, on top of everything else that Alyssa has done, she's what moves on Dany's eggs. Like, she's the one who steals them and gives them away. So, like, she's the catalyst to get Dany those eggs. And I think that that's really interesting, that this, enterprising and fire of the gods chasing person is the one who sends Dany the eggs in the end.
So, Melanie, are you the one that thought of the Quaithe?
No, it was Painkiller Jane.
Painkiller Jane. Okay, so I love this.
Jane.
Aziz, you tell me what you think. This is Painkiller Jane, one of our mutual patrons, in fact.
Yeah.
She called after reading this. She's like, dude, Alyssa Farman is Quaithe. And think about how much sense that would make, right? She sails around the world. She's already like a visionary person, okay? But she's specifically sailing west to go east. Ends up in a shy, okay? She's the one who put the dragon's eggs in motion to get to Dany. Then she's giving Dany advice on how to wake those dragon's eggs through dreams. Then telling her to embrace those dragons, all while telling her you got to go west to go east, which is exactly what Alyssa Farman did.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't think of any obvious detractions from that. Maybe surely further research is needed, but that's a fantastic start.
And Alyssa Farman was in love basically with a Dragon Lord princess in the past, right?
Yeah, and I'm not really a fan of the other Quaithe is this person theories. None of the others that have come along do I think have a lot of more than circumstantial evidence here. This one seems a lot stronger just on the surface so far. So that's exciting.
Well, I like the Shiera Sea Star theory. That's the one that makes the most sense to me because of the heart-shaped face connection to Mel.
Yeah. I think the timeline's really rough on that one. That's the problem for that one. It's really, really narrow fit to make it possible, if not impossible, because of the age of Melisandre and everything. So,
well, we don't know exactly how old Melisandre is in book canon. We just know
don't. But she would not be very old if she was a slave in Ashai at the time. It would and still have time to go back and have been taken by the other way around. Shiera's age doesn't allow much room for Melisandre to be her daughter in that sense.
Oh, I see. Yeah, there's and we're conflating two different theories also. There's the theory that Melisandre is the daughter of Bloodraven and Shiera Sea Star, which is Yolkboy's theory.
Right.
And again, congratulations, Yolkboy! But that is Yolkboy's theory. I'm a big fan of that one. It's got great symmetry, creates with the idea that the Melisandre is tutoring Jon and her father Bloodraven is tutoring Bran. But then if Shiera Sea Star is Quaithe, then she's tutoring Dany, and it creates this triumvirate, which I kind of like the symmetry of. But it's definitely very sketchy. And the Alyssa Farman is pretty cool. Like that theory makes a lot of sense. I mean, she ended up in Ashai. The connection to the dragon's eggs. She used to be in love with the dragon princess. She went west to go east. So pretty cool.
It's cool. Yeah, I like that. The west to go east part I hadn't considered that. That's really huge.
Yeah, it definitely makes your brain tingle a little bit.
Yep. And you're right about that story being super riveting and it's like, because none of us saw anything like that coming in this book. Like we thought there'd be stuff on dragons, and obviously there'd be more stuff on Targaryens and Targaryen magic maybe, and all these different cool characters. But this story was just like, what? This is out of nowhere. Really awesome.
Okay, and Sandra says they had a power surge. She should be back in a couple minutes. And she was just going to bring up the Quaithe Alyssa thing. So she should be back in a moment, and we're on the same page, which is cool. So yeah, that's really awesome. That's a really tantalizing theory. So nice one, Painkiller Jane. It just, makes a little bit of sense. It really does. And the symbolism of the Farmans is interesting because they have a white tower on their island, which makes you think of the white towers on islands that we've seen at Starfall and at Old Town. And both of those places have like Weirwood white tower symbolism. And then we get Silverwing landing on top of the tower at Old Town?
Yeah.
And breathing a bunch of flame and they flapped its wings and fanned the flames of the watchtower on top of the high tower.
That's
so
cool.
that was pretty cool too. So the whole idea of a dragon living in a white tower is essentially part of the dragon going into the Weirwood, that symbolism. And similarly, we see a bunch of silver dragons do this too. So Silverwing lives on an island in the middle of Red Lake, and Red Lake is tied to Rose of Red Lake and Skin Changing and the Children of the Forest, where Brandon of the Bloody Blade slew children or maybe impregnated them too. And then we have Adam Valerion with Sea Smoke, another pale gray dragon, supposedly stopping by the Isle of Faces to take counsel with the Green Men. So we keep having this idea of a white or silver dragon character going to a Weirwood place, whether it's an island with Weirwoods or a white tower that symbolizes a Weirwood. And so that's really exciting. Like symbolically, that all lines up pretty well. So anyways, so before we do our Septon Moon orgy, orgy of symbolism and body behavior, would anyone else like to bring up anything else? Because the Septon Moon thing is going to take a good 15 minutes, I would say.
Let's see. I had looked up a couple of things that probably weren't that relevant. I'd looked up more references to Leviathans, but I didn't got anything new out of it. And I had looked up something else, but I forget. Don't worry about it. Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, move on.
Hello.
Hey, she's back.
Hey.
We're back.
Sorry. We get to see if Photoshop saved my painting or not.
Oh, yes, that precious moment. It's pretty good about auto-saving usually, right?
Okay.
Yes, after a certain point, Photoshop, I think it's like after CS4. You guys don't need my nerd knowledge.
Yay, there it is.
I
It looks
pulled it
like
up on my phone and I caught the rest, and it sounds like you got my back door, Lucy, or at least
I
you
did.
picked
Yeah,
up.
yeah, I got your text. Yeah.
Perfect.
I don't know what you mean about back doors, but I did get your text.
What back doors? I wasn't.
What back doors? Don't get the cesspool started.
Oh my! I would never imply that.
Of course not.
I am pure.
So so Emma or Melanie, I keep deferring to you because of course me and Aziz are known for extended monologues and stuff. So would either one of you two like to bring up a topic before we get to the cock of the moon?
Yes.
I think you're doing very well. You are letting us interrupt you when necessary. No, I'm ready to discuss Septon Moon.
Yeah, cock of the moon talk. Woo!
My dragon, my Chinese water dragon, is male. We found out officially, and his name is Moon. And this happened like a week before. He was originally named Moon Dancer because we thought he was a girl, but now he is Moon. So please speak of my dragon's honor.
He is so handsome.
I've got one of the princesses of the cesspool, Painkiller Jane, speaking up to say that Aegon sitting on the purple and gold dragon was compared to him sitting on a turd, which is pure cesspool talk. And the moment I read that, I thought of you and Ravenous Reader, of course. Of course.
I do have
Zoom-
one super quick anecdote that I thought was hilarious along the lines of the dragon. Well, the dragon biting the baby and being hacked to bits wasn't hilarious. It was just weird. But Aegon, the unworthy, beating Aemon the Dragon Knight in the crib with his dragon egg was just too funny. That's like one of the last things in the whole book. It's like you're not told it's Aegon the unworthy and Aemon the Dragon Knight, but it's just Aegon and Aemon.
That's who it is, yeah.
That's so funny. He's 1.5 years old, and he's beating his infant brother with this dragon egg. He's just like what the hell? this guy.
which, by the way, is of course mythical astronomy symbolism. So Aemon the Dragon Knight has the icy white sword symbolism of the Kingsguard. Obviously, Aegon the Unworthy is a perfect evil Azor Ahai bad king, kind of dude. He's also like a bad Garth figure because he has tons of children, but he's basically like one of those disgusting type of Garth figures. Who Garth is pretty rapey, to be honest. So there is that. But in any case, Aegon the Unworthy would be like a Knights King figure. And what he's doing is he's putting the dragon into the ice. When he's taking a dragon egg and hitting Aemon the Dragon Knight over the head with it, that's essentially like the fire moon meteor getting planted into the ice moon. So it's literally a dragon egg meteor seed planted in the ice of Aemon the Dragon Knight. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, so Septon Moon. Zoom Zoom sent in a super chat, by the way. Thank you, Zoom Zoom. Just says happy Sunday with the little flower. Thank you. Looks like a tulip. All right. I pulled the quotes of Septon Moon so I'd have them aside. So Septon Moon, speaking of Garth figures, Septon Moon is a gross Garth figure. He matches Garth perfectly. Check out this description. Barefoot, bearded, and possessed of immense fervor, the poorest fellow could speak for hours and often did, and what he spoke about was sin. I am a sinner, were the words with which Septon Moon began every sermon, and so he was. A creature of immense appetites, a glutton and a drunkard renowned for his lechery, Moon lay each night with a different woman, impregnating so many of them that his acolytes began to say that his seed could make a barren woman fertile, which is one of the things they say about Garth the Green. Such was the ignorance and folly of his followers that this tale became widely believed. Husbands began to offer him their wives and mothers their daughters, which is, of course, standard cult leader behavior, but it's, again, something that they say about Garth. Septon Moon, by the way, Garth was a cult leader, so Septon Moon never refused such offers, and after a time, some of the hedge knights and men-at-arms amongst his rabble began to paint images of the cock of the moon on their shields, and a brisk trade grew up in clubs, pendants, and staffs carved to resemble Moon's member. A touch with the head of these talismans was believed to bestow prosperity and good fortune. So you can't talk about Septon Moon without moon meteor symbolism cropping up. But first, let's just talk about the Garthness. He's obviously a Garth character, right? I mean, this is the most Garth-like of anyone we've seen that isn't named Garth. Oh God, Sammy, what are you doing? No, zoom back in. Zoom back in.
It's the cock of the moon.
Going on? Oh, that's the cock of the moon.
All right, now the super chats are rolling in. Yes, feed us the super chats as we talk about the moon cock. So
the first time I read that sentence, I was like, it's LML's spirit animal.
Pretty much. Although I'm a monogamous horned lord, but that being said, yeah. So all right, so let's go back. So who is Septon Moon? He's basically a rebel Septon. He's the alt High Septon, if you will. He's during the time of Maegor the Cruel. He's basically the leader of the Poor Fellows, who of course are known as the Stars. So he's Septon Moon leading around the stars, and he issues forth the stars. He commands the stars like a moon, sending out moon meteors. But essentially, we get this High Septon that appeases the Targaryens, and Septon Moon calls this guy the High Lickspittle. And Septon Moon leads his followers to Old Town, basically sets up camp outside Old Town, and preaches against the High Lickspittle, and he preaches against the dragons. Even when Jaehaerys and Alysanne get married and want to come to Old Town to get blessed, and everyone basically is moving on past Maegor and all those wars, still Septon Moon is out there preaching against the dragons, like some of the other mad prophets that we've seen, like the guy who, the shepherd who led the attack on the dragon pit. He sounds very similar. You know, we got to cleanse the 7 kingdoms of dragons, yada, yada, yada. So that's who Septon Moon is. And here's the quote about that. Hundreds of poor fellows had been hunted down and slain, and their scalps delivered to the king's men for the bounty. But thousands more still roamed the woods and hedges and the wild places of the 7 kingdoms, cursing the Targaryens with their every breath. One band even crowned their own High Septon in the person of a bearded brute named Septon Moon. Septon Moon, the, quote, High Septon, raised up by the poor fellows against the man in Old Town they called the High Lickspittle, roamed the riverlands and the Reach at will, drawing huge crowds whenever he emerged from the woods to preach against the king. And I keep slowing down and emphasizing the woods thing because, of course, you guys know there's a big symbolic correlation between Weirwoods and the moon and Nissa Nissa. They all three sort of represent each other in various ways. And so we've got Septon Moon's stars coming out of the woods constantly. They hide in the woods. They come out of the woods. So you guys know what that's about. In any case, the quote goes on. Word reached King's Landing that Sir Joffrey Doggett had been seen entering Riverrun, not as a captive, but as a guest of Lord Tully. Septon Moon appeared once more, leading thousands of the faithful on a march across the Reach to Old Town. So I just love that line. Septon Moon appeared once more. It sounds like a moon coming out after like a foggy long night or something. And then it says, when Lord Oakhart and Lord Rowan appeared before him with their levies, they came not to attack Moon, but to join him. It's like, no, don't attack the moon. Oh, Sanri, you're making me happy.
I'm sorry.
No, you keep doing. You're doing the Lord's work.
When Aziz is here.
You're doing the Lord's work. This is great. So let's see here. And it re-emphasized later that Lords Oakhart and Rowan granted Moon their protection. So think about it. Lord Oakhart and Lord Rowan are both named after trees. Okay, and Oakhart in particular gives you the idea of a heart tree because it's an oak heart. And that symbolism is developed with Ari's Oakhart as well, as we've discussed. And then Rowan is Rowan Gold Tree. That's who they descend from, a child of Garth. So these are both descendants of Garth the Green, named after trees, and they're protecting the moon. And the moon comes out of the woods and sends their stars out of the woods. So it's a pretty constant theme that's running. Then it says, a massive hulk of a man, Moon had been blessed with a thunderous voice and an imposing physical presence, like the moon. Though his poor fellows had proclaimed him the true High Septon, this Septon, if indeed he was such, was no picture of piety. And then it goes on. So that's pretty cool. It's got the thunderous voice. So you think of the moon cracking, Nissa Nissa's cry, the thunderbolt meteor of the storm god. It's all sort of wrapped up there. And then, so let me pause here. Let me let you guys get in before we go to the death scene. Comments on Septon Moon so far?
this is kind of random, but the line about the thunderous voice definitely caught my eye. And what also caught my eye was when the fireworms were expunged from Arya's body, they made apparently a really nasty sound. And just, I'm curious to know what's going on with all of these sounds. But yeah, it's kind of not really like on topic.
Well, no, it is on topic. That's basically the Nissa Nissas. I've figured out that Nissa Nissas cry. Well, me and a few people have figured out that Nissa Nissas cry and all the horn blowing is essentially the same symbol. There's this very loud sound that fills the world at the time when the moon cracks. And Dragonbinder is the big clue about this, because Dragonbinder is a shivering hot scream. It splits the air like a sword thrust. It's like an anguished cry and a keening. So it's like it's got all of the symbolism. It's both a sword and a scream and a horn at the same time. And then we got Widow's Wail, which is a sword that symbolizes the comet that's named after a woman's cry. And what was it that cracked the moon? Was it the comet sword, or was it Nissa Nissa's cry? Well, the cry symbolizes the sword in a way. So it's really all the same thing. So that sound is a moon-breaking sound. And that has... Go ahead.
I was going to say, if you look at Arya's body as a moon being submerged in the ice, just like we were saying, she's a dragon locked in ice, the fireworms coming out and emitting that sound are really indicative of the comets coming out of the moon.
Right. The screaming sound can be located like sort of in the cracking moon or the things that come out of the moon, because the actual sound that we're talking about is literally the sound of things screaming into the atmosphere, which is very loud. You can read about descriptions of meteors from like the Tunguska event or other things like that. And they're really loud, as you might expect. So that's part of where all that comes from. And then, of course, magical horns might have been part of, summoning the comet or committing the blood magic sin that threw everything off kilter in the beginning or whatever. So, Emma,
I have some thoughts.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Septon Moon at this time is constantly paired as going around with Joffrey Doggett. And if you have a look at the House Doggett sigil, it's a black raven on white, and the diagonal half is a white unicorn in green. So you've got the unicorn in the green sea style symbolism going on. So they're paired together. So it's the unicorn leading the swords and the moon leading the stars, which is a really phenomenal pairing that I just got really, really excited about.
I love it so much.
The cock of the moon is a unicorn symbol. It's like the moon is usually female, but now the moon has a cock. And that's basically the idea of the moon meteors. Like the moon is a goddess before anything strikes it. But once there's an impregnation, the goddess explodes into swords and dragons. And so now those are the moon cocks. Those moon meteors are like seeds, like impregnating implements that land other places and grow, burning trees or mushroom clouds, if you will, when they land. So yes, it's all lots of unicorn stuff going on. And of course, when we say unicorn Aziz, there's so we're making a joke here. So Varys he's a eunuch, right? And he gets his member chopped off and it gets tossed into the flame and we get a blue flame that comes out. Well, blue flame, when Dany sees unicorns in the pyre, they're made of blue flame. And so we've connected this idea that the eunuch's horn is essentially the non-existent member of a eunuch, and it ties into like Osiris. Remember, Osiris was dismembered and they couldn't find his penis, and so they put something else instead of his penis, Isis, when she reassembled him. So there's this whole idea of like castration. And you notice there's an awful lot of castration in the story, and it's all sort of building on this symbolism. Which
so it's like a unicorn. Horn?
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly.
Exactly. You get it.
My contribution, of course, is a pun.
Well, no, that's the point. You're
Cool.
getting the joke now. That's
Nice.
and George is making this
Right
joke.
on.
It's not
Awesome.
our thing. George is making this joke for sure.
Well done, George.
I fought it at first, believe me. I always fight the cesspool stuff at first, and then I had to bow to the unicorn and give
George
way.
likes the cesspool stuff.
He
So
Yeah.
I have maybe a more mundane comparison here for Septon Moon, which is that he just has a huge Robert Baratheon vibe. Not only the obvious stuff, being a huge man that's very charismatic, who drinks a lot, and who sleeps with tons of women, but his whole thing is we have to get rid of all the Targaryens.
Yep.
Like he's obsessed with getting rid of all the Targaryens, just like Robert. So that's that's pretty cool. And he's undone by drinking too much and being killed, which is vaguely similar to Robert's end.
Yeah, totally. And of course, Robert is a Garth character. So that all fits.
Word. Yeah, good point.
Very well. So now Septon Moon's death is just ridiculous. I couldn't even keep a straight face. So check this out. Across the realm in King's Landing. Okay, yeah. So across the realm in King's Landing, Jaehaerys and his counselors considered how to rid the realm of this scourge, Septon Moon. The boy king and his sisters, Rhaena and Alysanne, all had dragons. And some felt the best way to deal with Septon Moon was the way that Aegon the Conqueror and his sisters had dealt with the two kings on the Field of Fire. So like, well, we should attack the moon with dragons. So then it says, Jaehaerys had no taste for such slaughter, however, and his mother, Queen Alyssa, flatly forbade it, being a moon maiden herself, reminding them of the fate of Rhaenys Targaryen and her dragon in Dorne. So Rhaenys Targaryen and her death is a picture of the whole God's Eye thing. The dragon gets shot through the eye and then falls down into hell. That is the whole point of the God's Eye. It's the eclipse wandering too close. The moon wanders too close to the sun. It makes an eclipse. The eclipse looks like an eye. And then that eye gets put out by the comet when it hits the moon. And so you've got this eye stabbing thing. And thus the Odin eye stabbing is united with this sun moon, Azor Ahai becoming a god event. Okay. So what's happening here is that he's saying, well, if you attack the moon with dragons, it might turn out like Rhaenys when her dragon got shot through the eye, which is just a big symbol of the entire moon exploding event. So that is really tremendous. Then it says, Lord Rogar, the king's hand, said with some reluctance that he would lead his own host across the reach and disperse Moon's men by force of arms, though it would mean pitting his Stormlanders and whatever other forces he might gather against Lord Rowan and Oakhart and their knights and men at arms. So Oakhart and Rowan are both trees. Here we have the Stormlord and Stormlanders threatening to strike the tree and disperse Moon's men. So this is a storm god's thunderbolt setting the tree on fire symbol, attached to the idea of breaking apart the stars from the moon. So that's really nice because it's tying that storm god thunderbolt myth into the moon stuff, which I always say is connected. And then he says, like as not, we will win, but not without cost. Like, yeah, that's an understatement. So then it says, mayhaps the gods were listening, for even as the king and council argued in King's Landing, the problem was resolved in a most unexpected way. Dusk was falling outside of Old Town when Septon Moon retired to his tent for his evening meal, exhausted by a day of preaching. As always, he was guarded by his poor fellows, by stars, huge strapping axemen with unshorn beards. But when a comely young woman presented herself at the Septon's tent with a flagon of wine that she wished to give to his holiness in return for his help, they admitted her at once, for they knew that what sort of help the woman required, the sort that would put a babe in her belly. A short time passed, during which the men outside the tent heard only occasional grunts and gusts of laughter from Septon Moon inside. But then suddenly there was a groan and a woman's shriek. There's the cry of agony and ecstasy, followed by a bellow of rage. The tent flap was thrown open and the woman burst out half naked and barefoot and dashed away wide-eyed and terrified before any of the poor fellows could think to stop her. Septon Moon himself followed a moment later, naked, roaring, and drenched in blood. He was holding his neck, and blood was leaking between his fingers and dripping down into his beard where his throat had been slit open. So this is like huge Weirwood stigmata symbolism. He's got bloody hands, the red smile, he's got a red beard, and it's all happening as, since he's a moon character, this is moon blood that's pouring out of him. And we've got the crescent cut across the neck that ties in the whole beheading and the sickles and the crescent moons and stuff. So that's just an orgy of moon symbolism. And then and I keep using the word orgy intentionally, obviously. So then it says, it is said that Moon staggered, because he's a stag man, through half the camp, lurching from campfire to campfire in pursuit of the doxy who had cut him. Finally, even his great strength failed him. He collapsed and died as his acolytes pressed around him, wailing their grief. So again, we've got wailing stars. Of his slayer, there was no sign. She had vanished into the night, never to be seen again, which kind of makes her sound like the comet, to be honest, striking him and then disappearing into the night, never to be seen again. Because that's exactly what Master Crescent says about the comet. It's a star with a long tail. It'll be here and it will disappear into the heavens, never to be seen again in our lifetime. So then it says, okay, let me pause there. So we've got the moon blood pouring out of Septon Moon. He's going from campfire to campfire, bleeding into the campfires, which gives you the whole bleeding stars symbolism. And it creates the idea of like these fiery smoke, mushroom cloud things happening from wherever the fiery moon blood lands on the earth. It makes these fires. So we know what that's about. And then here's the best part, perhaps. It says, in the aftermath of Moon's death, the ragged host that he had led to Old Town began to disintegrate. Some of his followers, so that's the moon disintegrating, obviously. Some of his followers had already slipped away when word of King Maegor's death and Prince Jaehaerys' ascension reached them. Now that trickle became a flood. So now we've got moon blood floods and a flood of stars. So bleeding stars, that's the whole flood symbolism. Waves of night and moon blood. Then it says, before the Septon's corpse had even begun to stink, a dozen rivals had come forward to claim his mantle, and fights began to break out amongst their respective followers, because the possession of Moon's mortal remains became itself a bone of contention between two of his would-be successors. And we don't need to go into the rest of that, but they fight over his corpse. They use it as a talisman. They try to attack Old Town with it. So if that's not people fighting over moon meteors and treating them as a sacred relic, then I don't know what is. So Melanie, I see you most excited about this. So I'll turn this over to you, but I want everybody to comment on all this crap.
The puns are just so good and they make me so happy. But yeah, I don't think I want to discount the idea of Septon Moon's mortal remains being used basically as a giant ram to open up Old Town. It's kind of like using a giant cock to get into Old Town. But no, I'm just excited about the whole passage because the mythical astronomy was just fantastic. And I think that Septon Moon dashing around from fire to fire was, to me, the most comedic and just hilarious part of the whole thing. And that's what I was excited about. It just made my day.
Oh, it's just hysterically funny. Emma, what do you think?
What Melanie was just saying there about using sort of an undead cock to open the gates of Old Town is very reminiscent of Dany using sort of the ship's mast, also known as Joso's cock, to get into Meereen. And so that, again, just strengthens some of the sort of wooden tree sea ship parallels with the moon, etc. And just the entirety of Septon Moon is just so overwhelmingly just ridiculously over the top. It's just absolutely like
It gives come into my castle a whole new meaning, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, and he was castrated too, as somebody pointed out in the chat. It was Julie Beth Stiles. So it says, when all of his men were dead or dying, a dozen of Lord Hightower's boldest knights, and there's a dozen knights again, rode forth from a sally port, seized Septon Moon's body, removed his head. Tanned and stuffed it, would later be presented to the High Septon and Starry Sept as a gift. So I don't think he was not castrated, but he was beheaded. But yeah, that's, more good.
There's a lot of castration in this whole fire and blood thing, so easy to mix it up.
Yeah, and then it says Moon's murder removed the last major obstacle to the ascension of Jaehaerys Targaryen to the Iron Throne. But from that day to this, debate has raged as to who was responsible for his death. So it's like, once the moon was knocked out, a dragon king could take the throne. So that's like the Bloodstone Emperor coming to power after he's broken the moon, which fits the theory pretty well. the timeline, the moon breaking happening at the beginning of the long night. And then it says debate is raged as to who was responsible. So that's pretty cool. Now George is making meta commentary about all of us talking about what broke the moon. So that's pretty fun.
There's also a passage, I think it's right before, I can't find it, but I looked for it earlier, where it says, there may be other moons, ... And literally in my head, I stopped and I was like, Lucy, there may be other moons. George is giving you a hint there, buddy.
Yeah, this is great because I still sometimes wonder if all this 2 moon symbolism is really like one moon that's split in half into ice and fire, and it looks like 2 moons, but it's really just ever one moon. But then we have this quote, if it should fall to me to don his mantle, his grace, of course, would have my support in any choice he might make, Septon Mateus assured the Queen Regent and her advisors. But not all of my brethren are so inclined, and dare I say, there are other moons out there.
Thank you.
So,
I knew you'd have it.
it's pretty cool because the myth actually says, there's a second moon in the sky. One day the other moon will kiss the sun too. So George consistently refers to the remaining moon as the other moon. And, my whole theory is that the one that died in the past was a fiery moon. So the one that's left is tied to the others. So there's other moons out there still. Yeah, that's the icy one.
Yep.
Pretty fun. What do you think of all that, Aziz? Pretty fucking funny, huh?
That's pretty cool. Yeah, that's a lot of it. Obviously, I don't have the same sense of picking up on these things. Once I'm pointed to them, they make sense to me. And yeah, that's really funny. The different running to the different fires, and you're right. It's really rich. You guys really thickened that picture a whole lot. There's so much going on between the lines there. That's really neat.
Your king is so happy right now.
He is extremely happy.
I switched the camera to look at Aziz's happy kitty. I'd had it on Sanri for a minute, but yeah,
more important.
So George, Anne Grohl, George's editor, has said before that George does this threefold giving of clues and foreshadowing before something happens, where the first clues that he drops are very hard to pick up on, and then the clues get more and more obvious leading up to the event. And the Red Wedding is the best example. The first foreshadowings we get are so, in the House of the Undying in book 2, it's hard to know what to make of that. But by the time it's like raining and the wolf is mad and biting the phrase and like Catelyn's misgivings, like the death foreshadowing is uber heavy right before it happens. And so I do wonder, like, think about A Dance with Dragons, okay? That was the one where Bonero pointed to the moon, made a fist, opened his fist in flames, and then painted Valyrian glyphs, doom and darkness, while preaching about like dragons in the dark eye of the evil one and stuff. So that to me was like a more obvious George going, yeah, think about the moon exploding in fire and creating doom and darkness when there's dragons involved. It's like he's trying to spell it out, because if my theory is right, what we're going to get at the end of the Winds of Winter is another moon meteor event. And in order for that to not come out of nowhere, he wants to lead us up to be thinking about cataclysmic meteors and moons exploding and comets and celestial cataclysms and all that shit. So this is what I think is he's amping it up in Fire and Blood. He gave us a lot of it in the World of Ice and Fire. And then I think we're going to get even more of it in the Winds of Winter leading up to the actual event, which should be basically the thing that triggers the new long night, which is something we probably expect to fall by the ends of Winter, right?
Yeah.
I had another thought. I'm sorry, I'm going to double back for a second.
Feel
about
free.
The castration of Septon Moon and how he isn't actually castrated. But if we think of Joffrey Doggett as his eunuch horn, then his eunuch horn does get taken into the possession of Jaehaerys because he gets accepted onto the Kingsguard. So in that sense,
and becomes a white sword, which is
exactly
yes. So Aziz, the unicorn is tied to blue flame, but also like white worms, white dragons, and things like that. Like for example,
cool.
on Drogo's pyre, Dany puts the white dragon's egg in his crotch, for example.
Oh yeah, true that.
And there's a lot of like worm penis, like sort of condescending language that builds on that too. So cool. Emma, did you have more on that?
No, that was sort of the only thought that I sort of had. It was just one that popped.
Emma,
into
do
my
you
head.
have any other thoughts on peony chopping to share with the group?
Penis chopping quite a lot, but not for right now. I need to go through Fire and Blood again to find them all.
Cool. So, yeah, Septon Moon. What can you say? That was obviously kind of a treat for me, for sure.
That was
just
for you.
I was,
Thanks for you.
I was giggling pretty hard, especially when we got to the other moons out there. Emmett even tweeted at me. He was like, "Oh, look at this," you know. Pretty.
See, I've been off Twitter. I didn't know other people caught it. Dang it.
Yep. The Nauticast boys are two of my most promising symbolism pupils. They're getting it. So let's see here. I shared this with Ideas of Ice and Fire yesterday, but Aziz, since you're a big Lovecraft guy, there's a particular quote about Alyssa Farman before she made her voyage, where she it talks about how she dreams of sailing west. And it's very evocative of Randolph Carter and his dreams of finding this lost city in Dream Quest for Kadath. So check this out. Her dreams were full of sundering rivers and windswept plains and towering mountains with their shoulders in the clouds, of green islands verdant in the sun, of strange beasts no man had tamed and queer fruits no man had tasted, of golden cities shining underneath strange stars. She was not the first to dream this dream. To me, that's like unquestionably Martin evoking that sort of feel of Randall Carter's dreams. What do you think?
I'd have to reread some of the language in Randolph Carter, but it absolutely felt Lovecrafty, the way he describes these dreamscapes and the golden cities. That's very much how he writes. So I totally agree. Yeah, the style is there. Maybe briefly a little bit think of Robert E. Howard as well, the landscapes, but the dream stuff it's more Lovecrafty than Howardian for sure. But there's a little of both probably.
Yeah, it's specifically this shining city that he's trying to find his way back to. So the whole passage feels like it, but that bit at the very end was like, oh, a golden shining city, and she's not the first to dream this dream. So it's like Martin pounding it in, be like, this is a dream. It's a dream world city, and other people have this dream. People like Randolph Carter. So
I definitely agree. I just want to say really quick, the spires of the towers going up in the tops of the clouds and just like the scope of these towers is definitely like, that's something that keyed me into. Yeah.
Yeah. And just the word choice is very specific, like sundering rivers. I was like, that made me kind of like raise an eyebrow. Sundering, eh?
And, so Melanie, you were pointing out when you were saying, oh, I'm trying to do mythical astronomy, you were comparing the ships to moons because one of them's named Autumn Moon. Well, what's interesting is that the Autumn Moon is the ship of the Hightowers. That's Norman Hightower's ship. And there's this line from A Feast for Crows when Sam sees the Hightower, and it says, he drained the dregs of his tankard, the torchlit terrace of the Quillen tankard. Oh, I'm sorry, this isn't Sam. This is Pate, the kid who dies in the prologue. He drained the dregs of his tankard. The torchlit terrace of the Quillen tankard was an island of light in a sea of mist this morning. Morning mist. Downriver, the distant beacon of the Hightower floated in the damp of the night like a hazy orange moon, but the light did little to lift his spirits. So an orange moon and an autumn moon sound very similar to me. And
it's a harvest moon.
Exactly, a harvest moon. And that's the symbolism attached to the Hightowers here. So it's kind of consistent. I'm not sure exactly what all of that gets into without diving into 10 minutes of symbolism mumbo jumbo, but I just thought it was kind of consistent and interesting.
Yeah, I'll think about that.
Yeah, that's cool.
Melanie, why don't you put forward a discussion topic? Do you have one that we haven't gotten to that you'd like to put forward?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. I did. Hang on just 1 second, and I will find it. Valyrian hellhorns, bringing death and destruction down on all those who heard their sound. Do you think that Euron and Victarion are going to get like a little extra surprise when they blow this?
I thought that was just a figurative way of saying it. They call dragons, and the dragons bring down death and destruction. But I've also got the theory that the horn is part of calling the comets or the meteors, which could kind of work for that too. Are you implying that the Hellhorn can do other things than call dragons, Melanie?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you could look at it both ways. Absolutely, like on a figurative level, like you're saying, but what if it does have like unintended consequences for Victarion and Euron, where it calls down more death and destruction than they are really like anticipating? I don't know. It just stuck out at me, and I was like, "Oh wow, Valyrian Hellhorns. That's interesting."
Yeah, there's a few references to them. I feel like they're being retconned a little bit. Like, you know, there's one of the Targaryens mentions like legends of Hellhorns. So you really get this idea that the Targaryens didn't manage to bring any Hellhorns from Valyria, and that there's something that the Valyrians had, but the Targaryens did not have. So Bridget Walsh with a super chat. Everyone on the panel and in the chat is 100%. Thank you to everyone for bringing their A game. Oh, you're quite welcome, Bridget. Thank you. And thank you to all the 200 plus people that have been watching here, pretty steady. So,
Ooh, I thought of one more thing.
Mm-hmm.
I had this idea. I was reading about Alysanne and Jaehaerys' child, Alyssa. And I remember a while ago we were talking, when we were doing the Good Queen Alysanne live stream, we were talking about Gale Targaryen possibly Gale Targaryen possibly being Alaric's child and being secretly a bastard. And I looked at the time frame, and Gale doesn't work out because Gale was born in 80 AC and Alaric died in 72 AC, so that's impossible. But I was looking at Alyssa because Alyssa is wild. It's almost like she has a measure of the wolf's blood in her. And she also has mismatched eyes. She's got a green eye and a purple eye. And that made me think of Tyrion. And I know like some people like it and some people don't, but there's the Tyrion Targaryen theory. And Tyrion's mismatched eyes are also green and black. But George kind of has a way of combining black and purple and dark blue symbolism. So I was wondering if Alyssa Targaryen, daughter of Alysanne and Jaehaerys, could possibly be an Alaric Stark.
I noticed that her hair was described as black, and I may be misremembering it, but it may be a misprint even, but I might be confusing her with Jocelyn, but it was at some point during her wedding or around the chapters of her wedding to Balon, where she's like talking about like all of the naughty things you shouldn't talk about as a lady, and I think her hair was described as black, but I could be wrong. But I would love that to work.
I don't remember her hair being black, but I would have to go back.
I'd have to look back to make sure I'm not crazy too. Also,
yeah, anybody that has Baratheon genes ends up with black hair pretty much, because it always is dominant.
Yeah, I might be.
But I did like the mismatch eyes, particularly because one of them was green and one of Tyrion's eyes is green. So I was a big fan of that. And there was also another person who had eyes that were. Oh, okay. So this is the topic. Aziz, we can bring you back in here since we've exiled you with our very nerdy video. So Aegon III, Dragon's Bane, seems to have parallels to Jon Snow. You were saying that there are plot-based parallels, and I noticed symbolic parallels. So I'm going to real quickly, the symbolic parallels, I'm going to list them off, and then I want you to tell us about how that works. So, or at least how the plot parallels go. So Aegon Dragon's Bane, he's described as a pale shadow. And it's very conspicuous. It's like the end of a paragraph, like Rhaenyra's pale shadow, period. So that's, of course, other language. Others are pale shadows all the time. Maybe one of the thoughts of what we should do with Aegon Dragonsbane after the war, well, maybe he should be sent to the wall. So that was interesting. He always dresses in black. He likes to look at the stars during the hour of the wolf. One of the ideas was maybe we should make him a eunuch. And of course, there's lots of loss of fertility symbolism when you go to the wall or when you get resurrected. He says that he's dead inside and walks the Red Keep like a ghost. And Jon, of course, covered himself in flour, dressed up like a ghost in the crypts, and he's half dead inside. So the symbolism abounds, but tell me about the plot parallels.
Okay, yeah, there's some really good plot parallels as well. Probably there's a few smaller ones that I'm probably going to forget off the top of my head, but two really major ones. One is going to happen, and one is probably going to happen, or could happen anyway. And then there's some more beyond that. But these two main ones, I think of one of the most like emotional, tearful scenes in Fire and Blood is the reunion of Aegon with his brother, who he thought was dead, Viserys, right? It sort of helps pull him out of his, well, he's clearly a traumatized, depressed person for good reason. He saw his mother eaten in front of him. His whole family was slaughtered. You know, he came of age during a terrible civil war during winter. So if you consider that he's kind of the product of two warring families, you've got that going. He's got that going for him. You already mentioned that he dresses in all black. Then we have, okay, so the reuniting of him with his brother is basically a parallel to Jon finding out that Bran and Rickon are alive, because Jon also thinks in this case, two of his brothers are dead. And so this is a very similar thing to Aegon III being, thinking his whole family is dead and then finding out that one of his brothers is alive. In this case, it'll be two brothers, but that's really strong, right?
That's cool, yeah.
Then you have, but the thing that I think is potentially a huge foreshadowing is the fact that Aegon III's dragon is killed under him. And that could be what happens with Jon's dragon if he gets to ride a dragon, which I think is pretty likely. I think most of us would agree that Jon riding a dragon is pretty likely. So that could predict what happens with him. It also could predict that he lives through the series as a traumatized, kind of like maybe a rough parallel to Frodo, who was just deeply, in Jon's case, he's literally dead and came back to life. In Aegon III's case, he had a near-death experience that was traumatizing. And then in addition to all the trauma from watching his mother die in front of him and his family and all that.
So let me hop in there real quick. One of the things that I've long predicted as a possible ending for Jon is that he becomes the new Cold Hands. And that kind of fits that idea, like dead inside, just sort of doing his duty, but not really enjoying it. I mean, that's Cold Hands. So yeah, that could fit. And consistently, the guy dresses in black. Aegon, Dragonsbane. Oh, so check this out. Aegon is terrified of dragons because he saw a dragon eat his mother when he was 6. It's messed up. So he's terrified. The dragon he's around most often is a pink dragon called Morning, who belongs to Rhaena Targaryen. And so a dragon called Morning is kind of crazy for symbolism, right? I mean, that's like, you might as well call it Dawn. So you've got this Jon analog, and he's scared of the Dawn dragon, the dragon of morning, which is interesting. So what we get also, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I like that a lot. Aegon III also marries Jaehaera at first, but she dies. But then he marries Daenerys. So Daenerys, obviously, that's hard to miss. And that's a unification of Targ lines when he does that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the Valyrian side, yeah.
Which is what Jon and Dany would be in a way.
Yeah, so that's pretty strong as well. There's unfortunately, because Fire and Blood ends where it does, there's probably future opportunities for Jon Snow parallels that we just wouldn't get till Fire and Blood 2. By which point those parallels may have already come to pass in the story, so they wouldn't necessarily be foreshadowing at this point. They would still be fun parallels. But if Fire and Blood Part 2 comes out after the series is complete, then we can't use that to as predictive. But I imagine we'll see more parallels to Jon and Aegon III as we learn more about him. But this stops with his, early he's 16 and dismisses Lord Manderley. By the way, the Manderley parallel is a thing too, because we have right now the situation in the North. Wyman Manderley is obviously working behind the scenes and positioning himself to be like Rickon's regent or something like that, just to be a big, powerful player in the game going forward. Meanwhile, the last regent of Aegon III was Theomore Manderley, who was also a big guy, and has a lot of parallels to Wyman. Of course, we see that the tradition of large Manderleys is a thing.
Awesome. Wow, that was tremendous. And of course, I've been obviously enjoying your series lately of doing the question of, listing a description of somebody and saying, who am I? But there's really two answers. I love that because it highlights the fact that George uses so many parallel arcs and symbolisms through his different characters and stuff. So
yeah,
really digging that. And I'm digging the fact that the entire fandom is like just tuning more into the idea that there are repeating patterns, even if they're not saying, archetype and mytheme and stuff like that. It's the same idea. Like people are picking up on these parallel characters all over the place.
I think it's kind of important too, because there is a section of the fandom. It's not like us, obviously not people here. People who are in this stream are a little wishy-washy or outright don't like all the fake history. So I think it's kind of important to show people that, hey, there's a lot in here. This does relate to A Song of Ice and Fire. It has serious predictive power to tell us what's coming, as well as just being fun. I mean, that's the part maybe you can't convince them of, but if you get them on track with the foreshadowing, they may, you might find more people realize what value it has. So I think that's cool.
Yeah, totally. And I couldn't have said it better myself. I was making that same argument about the World of Ice and Fire after it came out. Be like, hey guys, these stories from the Far East about the Great Empire of the Dawn, it's not just like filler that George whipped out for the heck of it. Like he's hiding some nuggets here, guys. And there was this little hardened knot of skeptics that are like, oh, those are just a coffee table book. Oh, blah, blah, blah. And there are some people reviewing Fire and Blood. They're like, oh, he just fallen in love with his own history, blah, blah. Like, no, dude, these are important clues that he's dropping now in the series. Just like he used Duncan Egg to drop clues about Bloodraven before Bloodraven appeared. He's telling us what these dragon fights are going to be like before he gives us a dragon fight. I mean, that's one of the things he's been doing in The Princess and the Queen and The Rogue Prince and Dance of the Dragons is like, here's what happens. It's a lot of bad things. Nobody wins. Like now we know what to expect. If two dragons fight, everyone's probably going to die or end up all fucked up and burned and broken and shit.
And to your point as well, it's maybe not the best place to say this because I'm preaching to the choir here, but The World of Ice and Fire maybe gave people the wrong impression. I love that book. I think it's great. It's a super reference, but it was George's first attempt at writing his fake history in his style of in-world, which is kind of different than the way just about any other author would do it. But he improved on that process. This book is just a lot more readable. It's got more dialogue, more characters, it's a more entertaining book, which I think, to be fair, some people say that The World of Ice and Fire is a little dry. And I can kind of see that. It's a page turner for me, but I can understand that for a lot of people, it's not. This one is, though. I think it's hard to make the case that this book isn't really just fun on its own merits, because it's it's more stories than history. It's history, but presented as stories rather than an accounting of what happened.
That's a very good point, and I think that we can really see that The World of Ice and Fire and even The Princess and the Queen and Sons of the Dragon and stuff, that those were edited and summarized, and this is the full narrative version, or at least to the extent that George intends it to be a narrative. And it was much more enjoyable. It had a lot more details that made some of these characters feel like more characters. You spent more time with the characters, so you got to know them a little better. You saw them at multiple points in their life. Like the sea snake is much more of a colorful figure to me now, as well as Visenya. I mentioned Visenya is becoming a lot more three-dimensional now as we find out more about her entire life. So the World of Ice and Fire was very edited down, all the Targaryen history, and just summarized. And it just doesn't grab you as much. I totally agree. The Targ history in the World of Ice and Fire, it's just like a Wikipedia page almost. So this was a lot more enjoyable. There's a lot of stories, like we mentioned, Alyssa Farman, and some other ones where you were really grabbed by the drama of what was going on. You felt for the characters. I really felt a lot for Aegon Dragonsbane, just being, seeing all the horrors and then being a pawn with all these nasty regents and mean old guy from Starpike. What's his name?
Unwin. The Peaks.
They're like, what a dick, dude. That guy is like abusive father central, like just totally gives you that vibe. And so you really felt for Aegon. And then his poor wife committed suicide or was murdered. So yeah, I don't know. Just to your point, it was very much more engaging, and there's a lot more character stuff to sort of sink your teeth into. Emma and Melanie, comments? Meta comments on the how you enjoyed the book and the writing conceits and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think you guys pretty much summed up everything that I thought about. I mean, instead of getting just like these really short little vignettes and that I felt like the World of Ice and Fire was like just these little quick snippets from all around Planetos, and I think that this was a little bit more relaxed and more fleshed out, and to me more enjoyable because it was more of a narrative. I mean, it was still kind of compartmentalized, but more of a narrative. Yeah.
Yep, it was fun. It was fun.
I liked how they would introduce a character and then you wouldn't hear about them a little bit, and then it would come back to like their story. Like I'm thinking of
Well, I know just what you mean, where George will be like, well, there was this person and we want to talk to you about that, but first we have to tell you this.
Yeah, and then they would come back and describe like all of the different Targaryens. Like if like Jaehaerys and Alysanne aren't even like really discussed until way later in the book, and then they start to give you Alysanne's character and they tell you her backstory. So I liked the way it was formatted like that because it felt way more engaging than just a list of dry histories. So
cool. And just a moment ago, we were talking about castration. And yeah, it's always a fun lead in. And we were also talking about usurpation and stuff like that. So we should give a quick shout out to Baal the Bard, who has a cool essay and YouTube video about the Amethyst Empress as an archetype, as sort of a displaced woman, a usurped queen archetype. And I'm looking for the link. Melanie, can you you're quicker at this than me. Can you pull it up? She's working on it. Thank you. Cool. And once again, I'll remind you, Crowfood's Daughter's new one about the Dothraki Sea is one you should check out. That's the Disputed Lands YouTube channel. And Joe Magician did a cool live stream yesterday about Night's King, which I have not had a chance to get back and watch, but that's about Nightfort. And I think he's got some predictions, not only studying the past horrors, but predicting the future. Sandra, you could probably tell us, you were there for that stream. Tell us, sell everyone on Joe's live stream from yesterday.
well, we discussed the Night Fort and Jon when he's resurrected and how he will come back, possibly more wolf than man. And it's a combination of Bookshelf Stud's essay that he wrote a long time ago and Matt's own original kind of theories about Mad Axe Jon is what we were calling him yesterday.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I'm not gonna feed all the details because y'all should go listen to it. It's a good stream. So.
Well, the Night Fort, all you have to say is Night Fort.
Night Fort.
It's pretty much like crack. Like if you're not interested in the Night Fort, then you're not a fantasy fan. I don't know what to say about that.
Night Fort.
So that's the Joe Magician YouTube channel. And Aziz, you mentioned you got the what'd you do?
Nymeria.
Which is the one you put out just now?
We just put out Nymeria Part 2, 10,000 ships yesterday. It goes from the point at which Nymeria and the Rhaena are fleeing. They go, we talk a lot about the Basilisk Isles and then Sothorios itself, and all the different cities they tried to found or repurpose and the history of those cities and those places, and then talk a lot about wyverns and brindled men and all the diseases and cool stuff like that. And then Nath and the Summer Islands, as well as talking about the characters, the relevant characters from there. There's a good bit on Melisandre and Melisandre's brothers, stuff like that. Yeah, so that was really fun. And that's just fresh out. Only about 36 hours ago that came out.
Very, very cool.
After that, we'll be working on Fire and Blood quite a lot. We're collaborating with Radio Westeros to do a Dance of the Dragons series. And I've got that Gagassos thing that I mentioned, the blood magic stuff, hybrid horrors or something like that. I'll call it. I don't know yet, but some sort of cool blood magic-y name, right?
Yeah, let me know if you need any help with that one.
Yeah,
and then, of course,
really will.
We've got Melanie Lot 7 with her King Under the Mountain essay. Like I said, I was teasing. We're going to do, I think it's going to be the subject of an upcoming Mythhead roundtable type event, so we can talk about it a little further. Not only have you got this one episode, you got notes for other stuff. So that is coming from Melanie Lot 7. And Archmaester Emma is hard at work deciphering symbolism of red fire and working on her YouTube channel, which will be coming. And of course, as I've said a couple times now, Emma, whenever you do launch your channel, I will, of course, feature you on whatever episode I'm doing and give you a nice little push on the swing, if you will. So
You got
Wish I
one
could
more
see-
super chat.
Jojo Lady Dane. Vic's death involved worms. Okay, Jojo Lady Dane, you want me to talk about it? All right, so
It's weird.
I'm gonna
It's
stop.
tricky.
It's tricky. Okay, so there's a description between there's the pork crackling and the blackened skin description of what's her name?
Araya.
Right before she dies and right before the worms pop out of her, her skin is red. She's cooking. It's hot to the touch. And at the end, it blackens and it looks like pork crackling, the Maester says. So Victarion's arm also looks like pork crackling, and it's also blackened, and it's like smoking and stuff. So there's obviously like fire magic going on there. And so some people have wondered, is there a connection? Did Mokoro put little fireworms in his arm, and is that what's happening there? So I being the negative Nilly that I am, was saying, no, I don't think so, primarily because Araya's skin only looks blackened like that at the very last stage of her life when she's dying. And Victarion is not dying. His arm is stronger, and it doesn't seem to be progressively going from red to black. Like it's black and like that, and it just is that way. It doesn't seem to be changing. And he doesn't have an early stage of fireworms, because the early stages of fireworms, or whatever these things are, don't give you black skin. That doesn't happen till the end. Also, I think if there were things wriggling inside of his arm, people would notice, because he's in close contact with all the Ironborn. And it's said that they notice his arm, but there's no talk of worms. So I don't think there's any worms in his arm, but I do think we're consistently shown that like if you compare it to the Dragonbinder horn, he was all burnt up inside too. So like when people try to use fire magic, it doesn't always work, and they end up burnt. No matter what it is, I'd say that's the parallel. But
yeah, and Mokoro has been really accurate and powerful with his magic and his predictions, so he seems to have more skill. And it seems, I agree with you. It seems like some sort of overlap rather than a direct parallel, but a similar kind of concept. Like if Araya was affected by the magical fallout zone that is now Valyria, which would be similar to what's going on east of Ashai with the Shadow. It's clearly magical stuff has ruined the landscape there as far as the rivers, and there's no kids. I mean, that's magic, right? And then so Valyria's have some sort of thing happen there as well. And that has, it's almost like radiation, where it just creates these constant mutations. And so I think there is a relationship, because the descriptions are too similar in ways that don't match with anything else. But I agree with LML's breakdown that there's some things that are too different as well that you can't really get around. So I think it's like Valyrian fire magic probably had capabilities like what Mokoro has done for Victarion. And maybe in Araya's case, she was affected by like multiple types of magic and multiple types of things, and so she got the fever. She also got these things inside her, and she also got who knows, whatever happened to Balerion was another thing, with the long 9-foot scar or scratch, whatever it is. So clearly multiple things happened to them, I think, because whatever did that 9-foot scar isn't the thing that put worms inside Araya. Probably. I mean, maybe it's that doesn't seem likely, right?
That sounds like another dragon. I mean, I can't think of anything else, or some other monstrous thing with a giant claw that can potentially fight off the Black Dread. But it's very consistent with another dragon wound, because frequently they grab each other and they try to rake each other's bellies with their legs. So yeah.
So I think it's like she was hit by like a broad spectrum of blood magic and magical fallout, whereas Victarion had this very concentrated particular spell cast on his arm only. So I think there's a relationship, but it's like 100 to 1. Like Victarion's is the small one, and what happened to Araya is like this massively blown up version with multiple types of magic and unintentional side effects. Yeah, because it wasn't, no one cast that on her. It just, she was affected somehow.
Yeah,
I don't think there's a sorcerer behind it.
I don't think Mokoro carries around a little glass vial with little baby like fireworms, and he like
he slipped him into an open wound in his hand when he wasn't
Right.
looking. Sleight of hand.
I have to say, like, at first, when I first read it, and on Twitter, I think JoJo Lady Dane was talking about this whole subject, and it got me thinking about leeches and all the times leeches are used, and like it made me think of leeches gone wrong. But but I don't think, now that I've thought about it for a while, I'm like, no, it's not a case of fire leeches gone wrong or magical fire leeches gone wrong. It's just something else entirely. It's bad.
I tend to think so. But the weirdest part is the faces and the hands on the worms. But I think that's supposed to be a clue that, like I said, this is some sort of the result of them trying to crossbreed people and dragons. And this was one of the accidental side, create, kill me kind of creations of it all. So, all right. Well, do we have any final requests? Sanrixian, do you have any topics that you would like to discuss that we have not mentioned?
Oh no, we've talked about dragons plenty for me. Thank you.
And I've had the screen locked on your drawing for the last 15 minutes or so. So we're checking it out. Do you want to zoom out and show us sort of what's going on here in the totality?
Yeah, I lost a little bit of the detailing I had spent on Silverwing when the power went out, but I decided to paint Burn Thornstead and kind of lay out rough colors for Alysanne and Jaehaerys's riding outfits, because these are the things I think about, guys. Riding outfits.
Neither one have saddles, I see. They're barebacking it, huh?
Well, they've been riding for most of their lives, so I feel like they can.
Oh, okay. I see.
I'm dodging that pun.
Well, I only mention that because I do think it's going to be the whole idea of Tyrion making saddles and Dany needing to armor her dragons and stuff. Like, I think that's a logical thing that George wants us to think about when he's showing us how vulnerable dragons can be from different kinds of attacks. So,
I mean, just speaking from my own personal universe and designing saddles and things, I have designed saddles for Targaryen dragons before, and I have drawings of them. It's just I think it's definitely going to happen. But Dany doesn't seem to need a saddle in the show yet, so who knows? I think it'll happen.
Well, this is beautiful, by the way. I love the feel of the dragons is really strong here. I love you can sort of see them intertwining and dancing with each other, like I was saying. It's pretty cool. And if I know you and the way that you do your layering, by the time you're done with your final highlights and lighting, you'll probably bring out some of the bronze shine of Vermithor.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So,
he was described as burnished bronze, which I just thought was so nice.
Yeah.
That caught
I'm just
me.
starting to get used to your process, so I know how your layers go. Like, you do the underlayer, then you add stuff on top, and
you're learning.
Yes, well. Cool, but yes, okay, so we like I said, last call or final thoughts on the anything in Fire and Blood before we head out. What about the dragon skin cloaks made from Taraxi's wings by the followers of the Shepherd? That's pretty cool.
Well, that was surprising and unexpected.
Or the dragon, who were the protectors of the dragon pit? They were called
the
Dragon Keepers.
Yeah, that was a little surprising, but 77 it said of them. That's kind of cool.
So who can tell me, class, who can tell me what the Dragon Keepers symbolize?
The Keepers of the Moon.
More specifically,
Dad, don't give in.
So they're called the Dragon Keepers. They wear black armor. They live in the dragon pit. Okay, so
I should know this. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, you know how I always compare the Night's Watch.
I knew you were going at Night's Watch.
Hang on. So the Night's Watch, Shadow Babies, and the idea of black meteors, black swords, and black dragons. They're all kind of similar. And essentially, for example, in Signs and Portals, Sansa, fleeing the Purple Wedding, ran through the cellars of the Red Keep and past the empty suits, the hollow knights of dragon armor. And she ran by with her torch, and it made the hollow knights seem to come to life. And so that was tying in the hollow knights epithet of Barrack's followers, who are analogous to Night's Watch, and that was tying it to them to dragon armor. And I always say that the Night's Watch basically has that black dragon symbolism. They use fire, they use dragon glass or Valyrian steel if they can get it. So these dragon keepers are just another version of the Black Knights that oppose the White Knights. They're combining dragon armor, and they wear black like the Night's Watch. They keep the dragons. They're sort of an opposite to the Kingsguard. The Kingsguard are parallel to the others, yada, yada, yada. So I just saw that as another analog to that whole idea.
Works for me.
There you go. Let's see what else. I'm looking through my notes here. Somebody said that there was a line about dragon seeds being spent in the woodpile, which was cool, because it gives you the idea of like the dragon going into the tree. And let's see here. Oh, when Joffrey Targaryen fell off Syrax, it was some obvious moon meteor symbolism. Not only a dragon falling from the sky, but the roof tiles fell like knives and stabbed him. So you got some falling meteor knives there. And the sword was said to stab him too. So that was pretty cool. And then somebody pulled the sword out like they were pulling a sword out of a moon meteor, kind of a thing. We had a couple of white knights that caught on fire, which gives you flaming white sword symbolism. Glendon Good caught on fire. There's a couple other ones.
Of course, the Burning Knight, but we knew that one already. That was
the Burning Knight.
Mhm.
Let's see.
Boros Baratheon's death was quite interesting as well, in that he, Lord Kermit Tully, so he's a green frogman, kills Lord Boros Baratheon. Lord Baratheon says, "I'd sooner dance in hell than wear your chains," and then charges straight into the spiked iron ball at the end of Lord Kermit's Morning Star, which took him full in the face in a grisly spray of blood and bone and brain. And of course, the wildlings, when they're burning the old gods, they give over sprays of blood and bone weirwood branches.
Right, and blood and bone in general is pretty reliable weirwood symbolism. So you've got the Morning Star, the Green Man summoning it or calling it, and then you got the Horned Lord Tree Man getting merged with a tree, turning into blood and bone. So, yep.
not
and
easy
then
being green.
not easy being green.
That's Kermit Tully. Yep.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of being green, I noticed a lot of the male characters were showing us the Holly Oak King transformation and just like being green in the beginning. Like I know that Roger Baratheon was, and some of the Targaryen kings too. Like it was talking about how they were young and green, and then as time passed, they became old and gray.
Oh yeah. So Aegon II, who rode Sunfire, is a great example of that. His dragon gets the one eye symbolism. Aegon himself is burned and he's drowned in the milk of the poppy, and then he comes back, and he's gray and ashen, so he's like a gray king figure, with the ash tree symbolism thrown in.
Gaunt,
so that's cool.
I noticed too. A lot of times
Gaunt.
they describe. Yeah.
He's also Joffrey.
Oh, and he's got a withered wooden leg. One of his broken legs is withered like a stick. So that's more Greenseer stuff.
Stick
Yeah, he has a lot of the parallels to, like I said, to Joffrey, but just the same as, which makes me think of Joffrey, the one who fell off of Syrax, which is like Rhaenyra's third-born child, and that's Cersei's third-born child, at least on TV, falls to his death.
Yep. And then there's all that Moondor stuff.
Yep. Yeah, it's pretty striking, the Aegon II Joffrey stuff. You got killed by poison given by his own counselors. You've got becomes king because his mother changes the succession, and he wasn't really that interested. He was just like, oh yeah, okay, I'm king now, And then you have just him being really shitty and cruel, all that, let's throw that in there too. And there's more, but yeah, that's a whole nother topic.
Hey, Aziz, what do you think about we finding out the origin of placing the dragon's eggs in the cradle? That was pretty interesting.
Oh, that was cool, because that was actually, I'll give myself a small pat on the back for that one, because I'd sort of predicted that it was a new thing. So having it confirmed specifically to the person who originated it was very nice. There left very little doubt there, because we didn't have any stories of dragon eggs in cradles before, and there was like Maegor and Aenys. Aenys was Given's Quicksilver. a hatchling. So it's specifically described that way. And Maegor, didn't bond with anybody until Balerion, and then Aemond One Eye didn't bond with someone until Vhagar. So there was there wasn't much hint of that. So that was cool. I'm glad to see that tied, all tied up and given a nice front and end.
I again, to go back to that freaky one where they get the mutated dragon that attacks the baby. It's like, ooh, because I've heard people wonder about that. Like, is it really safe to put dragon's eggs in the cradle? Like, well, maybe not.
Apparently not. Yeah, apparently every once in a while they bite a whole piece of the arm off.
Yeah, but hey, who did it, right?
What's
who
that?
was the first one to do it?
Targaryen. Yeah.
Okay.
She put it in her Jaehaerys and Alysanne's cradles when they were babies.
That did kill one of my an old tinfoil theory I had, which was that the dragon egg, if you put an egg in the cradle, the egg acquires the personality of the rider, of the future rider, and that would explain the cannibal. That would have been Maegor's egg that hatched and then just left him. But that theory doesn't work anymore.
But that's a very interesting theory, though. But it could explain the deep bond between some of the dragons and the ones who are placed in the cradle, like Silverwing and Vermithor, are really, really, really bonded to Alysanne and Jaehaerys, at least. It seems.
I'm holding back the urge to sing "Cats in the Cradle" by the thinnest of margins. No,
do it.
No, the point is restraint. Anyways, Melanie Lot 7, Painkiller Jane is bringing up something cool in the chat about Andrew Farman as a failed green seer.
Yeah.
Can I jump in real quick to say I got to leave? I have to. It's been amazing, but I have a few birthday things going on that I have
That's
to
cool.
leave
It's
for.
only been 3 hours now. It's cool.
Yeah,
We're getting ready
3:15 is a good contribution. Yeah.
Yeah,
this has been super fun.
Cool, man. Yeah, when I see one of the 420s in sight, I usually press forward to that and then press the stop button. So we're coming up on 420 Mountain Time. So we got 7 more minutes. But yeah, go ahead and peace out and say goodbye, everyone. Of course, we know where to find you. History of Westeros podcast. Happy birthday, Aziz. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thanks. It was a great pleasure.
Yeah, appreciate it. Appreciate the invite. Appreciate everyone showing up in the chat. There's a lot of people with great convos and great questions. And of course, my fellow co-panelists here. Everybody was awesome, and we all are learning so much. And this is what it's all about: going into the fun material, or fun new material. So this is the height of our fandom.
I assume you'll have some Fire and Blood stuff coming on your channel too.
Yeah, we haven't announced today our first live stream yet, but I read it for the first time through without taking any notes. Actually, I took a ton of notes, but I just wanted to read it as a fan first. I'm going through it the second time, taking lots of notes, and then so I imagine it'll be about 7 to 10 days. Probably like the first week of December, we'll announce a live stream. It'll be likely during the week, rather than on a weekend, but we'll see. So yeah, keep an eye out for that, and can't wait to do that.
Cool. Well, we're just going to say a little bit about House Farming and wrap it up. But thank you, Aziz, and enjoy your birthday.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye. See y'all soon.
Happy birthday, Aziz.
Happy birthday.
Mm-hmm.
So House Farmin, House
Farmin.
words are the wind, our steed. So that's crazy. Riding the wind. House Farmin has the White Tower. I already mentioned that. They're on an island, which gives you the whole Mists of Avalon, Isle of Avalon kind of thing. He ends his life by trying to fly, and he falls, but he says, "Oh, I can fly," and then jumps out the window, which makes you think of Bran flying and falling in his dream, and the other singers that are impaled on ice spires at the bottom, the people who died instead of flying, like Andrew Farman. So,
absolutely took the words out of my mouth. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. There must be more words. Come on.
Okay, more words. Yes. Andrew Farman was also stuck in a lavender wedding where he was so unhappy and nobody gave him any love. Poor guy. He just had this, really banal existence and just moped around. And so that part of it was really sad. But yeah, he was definitely a failed green seer. And the line that you mentioned about, I can fly too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like making the bad man fly by pushing him out of the moon door. It's the exact same symbolism. And I think that whole idea of falling into an icy death is essentially symbolic for other transformation, whether it's being impaled on ice spires or falling into a frozen lake it's just the Lucifer Frozen Lake symbolism. So yeah, so the failed green seer, meaning like a green seer who turned into like a Night's King or like an othery type of figure.
Mhm.
What do you think, Emma?
Or maybe one who didn't fly at all, if we're looking at it from Euron's standpoint, where he was also kind of a failed green seer.
Yeah, I guess that's true. There's a couple ideas that could qualify as, quote, failed green seer. So.
And Rhaena, of course, does have sort of her blue dragon, Dreamfire. So that sort of means that Andrew has wed a sort of blue dragon queen, which then brings in all the extra, potentially other style symbolism as well.
Totally. And the thing I love about Dreamfire, it was a pale blue dragon with cobalt flame, is that Dreamfire makes me think of the blue and silver fire swords that Jaime and Brienne wield in Jaime's Weirwood Stump dream. Not only are those Dreamfire swords, but they're tied to Weirwoods. And of course, the whole white sword symbolism can potentially relate to Weirwoods. And so you've got Farman with the white tower and the icy green seer symbolism. So to me, that sort of fits with the whole Dreamfire. To me, I think the whole Dawn is connected to the Weirwoods in some way. I'm not sure what, obviously they're both Weirwoods turned to pale stone. Dawn was made from a pale stone. All the comparisons about the others being similar to Dawn also bounce off of Weirwoods. They're all pale white and milky. The Weirwood face called the Black Gate shines with milk and moonlight, which is a lot like Dawn, made of milk glass and alive with light. So there's some sort of connection there with ice swords and Dawn and Weirwoods, and I'm not sure what it is because I haven't gotten around to digging it up yet. But I know a few people are onto that, and I think that is what's going on here, I guess I would say.
Nothing burns like the cold.
Exactly. Dreamfire. That's what Dreamfire is. It's cobalt blue flame. So it's like the others. You could just say it that way. Like the others have cold blue starfire. It's the only place we see blue fire. And then we've got, Dreamfire, a blue dragon, and Tessarion, a blue dragon who's called the Blue Queen, as opposed to Melisandre as a Red Queen. So it's all pretty consistent to me. But it is 4:20 Mountain Time. So let's check in with Sanrixian's drawing one last time here and see where we're at. Sanri, it looks like you're going to be working on this one a little while longer, huh?
Yeah, this is a very complicated one. I got a lot of painting to do on this one, so.
Stupid dragon scales.
Oh, yeah. I always do it to myself, too. I'm like, I'm not going to draw all the scales this time. And then I'm like, I can't not draw all the scales. It's not the same. But yeah, I really like their faces. This is my favorite part so far.
I can tell you that this is going to be a fan favorite by the time it's done. Everyone loves Jaehaerys and Alysanne, and it's nice. I'm glad we picked the one, like, with all the scenes of dragons killing each other. We found two dragons in love. I like it.
Yes, that's what I wanted to do today.
Yay.
I wanted to distract everyone from the horrifying worms and death scenes and nether lips with pretty dragons and love.
Yeah, I didn't ask you to draw worms coming out of smoking nether lips. No, we wouldn't do that.
That's a different stream. Oh, and your bonus.
Yeah, hopefully that's nobody's stream. Yes, Cock of the Moon. Here we go.
Magic powder to make your maidens fertile. One shake is all it takes. I don't know. I'm sorry. Just put me in the shame cube forever.
I'm entertained. It's great.
If you're in the shame cube, you're sitting in a throne on the shame cube. That's and we all know what throne that is. Boom. Okay, all right. The cess throne, porcelain cess throne. No, it's great. It's beautiful, Sanri. I like it. And yeah, Jaehaerys is said to wear green, isn't he? I forgot about that.
I just think, yeah, the green, and it matches the bronze nicely. So
Cool. Well, it's lovely, and thank you as always for. Sean E is trying to buy the Cock of the Moon picture from you.
I will post it on the internet, and you can do with it what you will. I don't control your printer, Sean.
Yes, you can do what you will with the Cock of the Moon in the privacy of your own house. Nobody will know. So there you go. All right. Well, we've already said what's upcoming, but everybody give your websites and where to find you real quick before we jump out. Starting with you, Sanri, since you're here. Talking to you.
Just find me at Sanrixian on Twitter, sanrixian.com, and the calendar is the biggest thing that I have upcoming, which there should be an announcement within a week about that. So keep your eyes open. Follow my Twitter, easiest place to find me.
Either one of you ladies, feel free.
Go, Emma, go.
Red Mice at Play WordPress, which is redmiceatplay.wordpress.com. And I'm currently working on fire symbolism, just finishing up the red fire essay. I think I've got it worked out. I just need to find out how to sort of summarize pretty much every single one of LML's essays to fit it inside the red fire essay, which is currently the major issue I'm having at the moment. Because you literally, there's like your basic bloodstone stuff, and then there's the werewood compendium needs to go in there, and the dragon locked in ice, and I don't, yeah, it's a monster. So that's why it's currently taking so long.
Yeah, blame George. That's all I can say. Blame George. Not my fault. People complain about the length of my stuff, and I'm just like, man, I don't know. It takes that long to follow all of George's symbolism. Blame him. The books are long. But yeah. Anyways, well, we'll look forward to that. And like I said, I'll be sure to have you on whenever you publish that. It's like I do with all the myth heads. Spread the love. Honestly, I love doing that. I love bringing attention to other people's content because everyone loves that. The recommendations, getting turned on to new content and stuff. So that's how we do it. It's how we knit the community together. In any case, Melanie Lot 7, your YouTube channel is named Melanie Lot 7, correct?
It is. I'll post the link in the chat, and you can find me on Twitter at Melanie Lot 7, 7 being the number not spelled out. And yeah, come find me on there because I'm on there a lot.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much, guys. And of course, you can find my podcast in your podcast feed, wherever podcasts are found. It's called The Mythical Astronomy of Ice and Fire, in case you didn't know. LuciferMeansLightbringer.com is where you can find all of my material. And by the way, I will have a Between Two Weirwoods episode coming very soon. A little announcement here. So in addition to doing panels, which I'm going to continue to do, I'm also going to start doing one-on-one, almost like interview discussions with content creators. And the first one's going to be with Gray Area. And essentially what it will be is I'll have Gray Area on. We'll talk a little bit about her, how she got into the fandom and how she got her channel going and stuff like that, a little bit. But then what I'll do is we'll get into some of her biggest videos and theories, and we'll discuss them because I always have ideas when I watch other people's videos. And frequently, since I've got this sort of more symbolic lens that I like to apply and that we myth heads like to apply, most other people are looking at the story with symbolism only like a little bit on the margins, but primarily they're looking at the sort of the main story and analyzing it. So I think there's a lot of fertile ground for me to essentially have somebody on, like say Robert from In Deep Geek, Gray Area, or Melanie Lot 7 with her King Under the Mountain episode, and essentially do, although I guess I should separate that. I think Melanie's thing is going to be a panel, since that's such a fun myth head idea. We'll have a bunch of people on. But what I'm going to do is another one is, well, I won't make any announcements ahead of time, but definitely Robert from In Deep Geek, Gray Area, and I'm sure I'll con Aziz into doing it. And what it'll do, like I said, we'll go over some of their cool theories, and we will discuss them, and I'll add sort of the symbolic layers if I can add to their theory, and we'll just use it as a jumping point and just do like a one-on-one discussion. So that'll be fun. And yeah, so the one with Gray Area is either going to be next week or the week after. And whichever week isn't that, it will be a follow-up Q&A to discuss the backwards prologue, which was a big brain scrambler and also gave us a lot of new ideas about how the long night might have played out and stuff like that, which is ripe for discussion. So that's what's coming your way the next 2 Starry Wisdom Sundays. One of them will be a Between Two Weirwoods inside the Actors Studio, somebody's suggesting. Yeah, I'm not sure what the name will be. It'll probably just be Between Two Weirwoods, like with Gray Area or Conversations with Gray Area. I don't know what I'll call it, but it'll be something like that. And then we'll do the Q&A timeline on the backwards prologue. So that's what's coming your way. And patrons can also look forward to seeing the Jamie and Brienne thing come out this week. I've almost got it done, but obviously I had to put it down to do all the fire and blood, like pounding the audiobook in my head like over and over and over and over. So a discourse with the dragon, Sanrixian suggests. Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, so Emmett's another one I'd like to get on. Although, by the way, Jojo Lady Dane, I did have Emmett on with a Night's King Apocalypse live stream a few months ago, and we did talk about his Eldritch Apocalypse and the Euron thing quite a bit. So, but yeah, I'm sure he's excited about the Krakens that we cited for sure, of course. So that's it, guys. I'll give you one last chance to say goodbye, but that's it. Let's do it.
See ya.
Bye, everybody.
Have a great one.
And thank you all, of course, for joining me. All right. Bye, guys. Stop.